Hey guys. This is part 2 of What If Naruto Was Feared and Respected. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 6, Ascension. When was the last time you were broken? The hushed voice awoke Kusai from his slumber, and it was not until a few moments passed that he realized the whisper had come from his dream. He could not recall any of the details of the dream except for the questions still lingering in his troubled mind. He did not have an answer. His soul and self-confidence had been beaten and bruised, sure, but had never actually been broken. What did that even mean exactly? To be so crestfallen that there was absolutely no way for a person to go down any lower? To reach rock bottom? What did that feel like? Why was it even important in the first place? These thoughts began to frustrate Kusai in the early morning hours. He heard Naruto stir in his sleeping bag next to him. Kusai took a deep breath and looked out upon the eastern dunes. The sun was creeping through the sand particles, turning them into brilliant diamonds of solitude. Kusai wondered what it would be like to be sand. To be coarse yet soft in structure and feeling. Maybe the sand knew what it was like to feel broken. Sand was also surrounded by more sand, so it was never really alone. He pondered what the feeling of never being alone felt like, and he became jealous of the sand. On the other hand, the sand may have not been free, so it could be sacrificing that liberty for its own infinite presence of company. Kusai felt like it was a fair trade. The words Naruto had said to him the night before also affected his thinking. Naruto believed in him. Even though he had no idea of what Kusai could do or what his attributes were, he still believed in him. Kusai wondered if that was possible. To believe in someone so easily. Did that negate the significance of belief, or did it accurately represent its nature? Kusai, much like the sand, had no idea. A few minutes later, Naruto rose from his sleeping position and grinned brightly at Kusai. Morning! Naruto's cheerful greeting earned him a soft smile and a kind reply from Kusai. Morning, Uzumaki-san. Naruto squirmed out of his sleeping bag, and Kusai observed that he was only wearing his pants and a tight, black mesh undershirt. As Naruto was reaching into his knapsack to get his clothes and cloak, he locked eyes with Kusai. Prepare yourself for today, Kusai. We should reach the oasis at high noon. We will want to act then because it should be too hot for the bandits to be outside. They might have a guard or two, but we won't know for sure until we get there. Naruto noticed the way Kusai's eyes started to shake slightly in panic and beads of sweat formed along his brow. It could really hinder the mission if Kusai was not fully prepared when the time came. Naruto knew this and wondered what the day would bring. Just be ready, okay? He gave Naruto a nervous nod, and they left it at that. When they began to walk again towards their destination, Naruto could not shake off his worry for his partner. Kusai could be a liability if he did not relax when the time came. Naruto knew he could handle whatever was thrown at him, but if Kusai made a foolish move or did not stay close to him, he could be hurt. That was, of course, the last thing Naruto wanted to happen. He never wanted his comrades to suffer because of his mistakes and faults. Naruto did not really want to hurt anybody. He had wanted to drive out the hate in the world, and he knew that he could not completely abolish it. But he had rescued Sasuke from the world and stopped enemy after enemy through his means of showing them what he was capable of. Naruto had built up everyone's beliefs and hopes on his shoulders and protected all of them. There were times all the weight felt heavy, but he kept moving forward with it all because that was what they had done for him. Now he was carrying Kusai, and when the moment came that the man realized he could walk himself, then Naruto would let him down. His friends and masters over the years had done the same with him. Naruto was ready to show Kusai that he could do it. He could move forward. Perhaps, doubting the boy was a fruitless endeavor, Naruto thought. Instead, he should be acting on the beliefs he had conveyed the night before. So, Naruto heaved up his resolve and solidified it in his chest for his and Kusai's sake. The sun had entered the blue sky and scorched the sand dunes below it as the two shinobi journeyed through them. Kusai felt his body feel heavy after an hour or two of marching. The battle in his mind began to transpire again, and Kusai felt uncertain. He would have to fight, he knew he would. Fear was holding the weight in his soul down, and it tried to fill in the crack Naruto had created the night before. As the fear started to slide its earthy self into the crack, the damage grew. Kusai, I believe in you. The crack expanded all of a sudden, and the weight lost some of its power. Kusai felt something grow in his heart, something he had forgotten. Determination. He wanted to show his capabilities to the man that believed in him. He was determined to show the world what Kusai could do. It was not a strong determination. In fact, It was quite weak, but it was present and full of potential. It was like a nail driven into the crack of belief, and with every swing of the hammer, the crack would expand until the weight was destroyed. It would need help, however, and the one who held the hammer was the one who believed. Naruto suddenly stopped at the base of a dune. He motioned for Kusuai to follow him slowly. When they reached the crest of the dune, Kusuai stared in awe at what was before him. The grass where the sand ended was fresh and green. The oasis was covered with beautiful palm trees, lush foliage, and sounds of gentle water trickling through it. The wind picked up at that moment, allowing the trees to sway with its kind breeze. The dense foliage of the oasis covered a considerable area of about 1 square mile. The two shinobi neared the tall trees, and after they entered the dense vegetation, they quickly encountered a clearing of grass. The village began in the clearing with small houses and shops dotted throughout the grass. In the center of the large clearing stood a great white stone building surrounded by towering walls comprised of similar white stone. There was no sign of people around. Naruto's eyes lowered in scrutiny, and he motioned for Kusuai to follow. The two of them darted through the surrounding buildings, going in and out of them with silent precision. During this movement, Kusuai had performed a shunshin into one of the houses and had landed directly next to a rotting corpse. Kusuai almost yelled out in shock, but Naruto had been there to silence him promptly with his hand covering his mouth. He put his other finger up to his closed lips to indicate the necessity for silence. Kusuai nodded with widened eyes and Naruto released him. For a brief moment, Naruto stared at the corpse with something similar to pity. It was the remains of some poor villager who appeared to have been dead for weeks. The constant heat had advanced the decaying process, making the whole house stink of rotten flesh. There were probably more cadavers of villagers throughout the village, and Naruto had no doubt that the bandits were responsible. A flame seemed to envelope Naruto's insides, and he burned to make those men receive their justice soon. The two men moved on after that. When they reached the high walls, Naruto pressed his hand against the white stone. It was hot to the touch, but Naruto did not seem to mind. Naruto then dropped his hand, and to Kusuai's surprise he knelt down and became still. He remained motionless for quite some time, and just when Kusuai thought he was asleep, Naruto opened his eyes. Kusuai's shock grew at seeing yellow, toad-like eyes instead of the familiar blue ones on Naruto's features. Naruto noticed his friend's confusion and whispered to him. "I'm a sage," Naruto explained. "I absorb the nature chakra around me and utilize it to my advantage. There's a lot of nature chakra in this oasis, and I become a sensory ninja when I absorb it." Naruto's eyes became narrow for a second. "I sense that there are about 50 men within this compound. Most are asleep because of the heat. There are a few awake, though." Kusuai shook away his bewilderment for the time being and focused on the task at hand. "Can you sense which one is the leader?" Naruto nodded. "Yes, he seems to be awake and residing in the top floor of that large building. I could probably crash through the window and land directly onto him from here. However, it would alert everyone to our presence. I'd rather not risk it." Naruto paused for a second, then fastened his gaze to Kusuai. "I believe I have another plan." As Naruto began to explain, Kusuai could feel the weight become heavier. The crack was still there, but compared to the sheer size of the black iron, it was almost unnoticeable. He was not certain as to why it was becoming heavier, and his hesitation was growing, but that was the problem. Kusuai was uncertain. Kuratsuchi always enjoyed the moment of instant change when she left Tetsu no Kuni. The stark contrast of leaving the snow-covered mountains to the summer lands enraptured her attention and senses. The air was no longer chilled with the feelings of crisp awareness, but suddenly became warm with promises of airy freshness for those who walked among the sunlit trees. The crunch of snow was replaced with the soft sounds of fresh grass surrendering to the pressure of her feminine footsteps. She had been descending down the elevation of the high mountains of Tetsu no Kuni, but once the snow was gone, she reached the flattened areas and hills surrounding the southern borders of her land, Suchi no Kuni. A long river skirted along this border that ran its course through multiple countries and eventually ended at the sea to the south. The river passed directly through Kusugakure, thus the means of following said river was within Kuratsuchi's intentions. Because of the river's natural, lazy course, a main trade route had been paved next to its constant flow of water some time ago. It was one of the main roads used to reach Tetsu no Kuni, but it was still seldom used. Kuratsuchi found herself traveling along this path at a calm speed that would eventually lead her to her destination. She was quite familiar with this path and knew from experience that if she maintained her pacing, then she would reach Kusa by sundown tomorrow. There was a part of her that wanted desperately to run with full speed so she could see the source of her recent troubles. But that would be foolish. After all, He was surely not even there yet, as their appointment was not for another week. Even if she went as slow as possible, she would still most likely enter the village before he did. She was not looking forward to being in that small village alone waiting for a man she barely knew. Despite this, she wanted to get there and see him. She needed to see him, to speak with him, to know more about him, and to figure out what these feelings meant. As the daylight began to wane into the late afternoon, the trees following the river turned golden with sunlight reaching into the trunks and leaves from its western position. The path turned around a curve in the river, and that was when Kuratsuchi saw a silhouette of a lone woman several meters in front of her. Kuratsuchi maintained her speed and casually strolled closer to the woman. As she neared the figure, she noted that the woman was sitting on a stump of some old tree and had a forlorn expression on her wearied features. She appeared to be in her mid-40s or 50s and had a shock of graying, frizzled hair on her scalp. Even from a considerable distance, Kuratsuchi could easily hear the woman's frantic breathing. The woman did not seem to notice Kuratsuchi until she was almost a few feet from her, and at that moment, she practically fell from her seat on the stump. She screamed sharply and had a glare of genuine fear in her old, tired eyes. Kuratsuchi gave her a disarming smile and bent over slightly to make her figure less intimidating. The woman's eyes lost their fear at the sight of Kuratsuchi's smile, and she calmed down almost as quickly as she had been startled. Kuratsuchi felt it was appropriate to speak first and lessen the tension even further. She made her tone as kind and as innocent as she could muster. "Sorry, miss. I didn't mean to startle you. Is everything all right?" The woman was far more placid than she appeared to be at first. She noticed the sincerity in the rosy eyes of the young woman in front of her and deemed her trustworthy. "It's fine. I'm sorry, dear. It's just that I thought you were one of those men." The quick flash of curiosity and trained suspicion on Kuratsuchi's brow did not go unnoticed by the woman. She was a mother, after all. "Are you a kunoichi?" The woman had been alive long enough to tell the difference between a civilian and a shinobi by the way their eyes searched something. She had learned many years ago that their eyes were always calculating and observing their surroundings, as if they were searching for a lost puzzle or trick in reality. Kuratsuchi did not seem perturbed by the brash question, at least outwardly. She simply narrowed her eyes by the slightest margin to indicate her acknowledgement of the question. "Yes, I am." "What men are you referring to? Have they done anything to harm you?" The woman's answer was immediate. "Yes. They took my daughter. My only child. My husband is a farmer, and is in Kusa right now selling crops. It was just me and her, and they broke into our home and took her." The woman was choking out her words because she felt her throat get tight and heated from the raw emotion. "They would have taken me too if I didn't manage to get away." Her eyes showed desperation and true fatigue, something all shinobi could relate with. Kuratsuchi took a deep breath and assessed the situation properly. She kept her voice leveled and impassive. "Tell me everything. I can get her back, but I need to know everything. How far away you live, and when this incident occurred. Don't leave anything out." The woman nodded and was amenable. Okay. Our house is about 2 hours down the path. They broke in a little less than 3 hours ago, I think. Junko, my daughter, and I were making dinner. I was chopping the vegetables when they barged in. There were about 5 of them, and they had weapons." "What kind of weapons?" Kuratsuchi asked. "Knives, swords. One of them had those kunai that you ninja use. Anyways, one of them grabbed me and I managed to stab him in the arm with my cutting knife. The rest of the men had taken Junko by that point, so I escaped out the back door. I wanted to run in the direction of Kusa, but there were more of those men on that side, blocking me, so I ran this way, hoping to lose them. They didn't really give chase, but I was so scared that I ran until I couldn't run anymore." The amount of shame and worry in the woman's features was palpable. "Please, I beg of you, bring my Junko back. She's such a sweet girl, barely 17. When I think about what those awful, perverted men are going to do to her, I just..." The woman finally broke down and wailed into her hands. The rest of her cries and pleas were jargon to Kuratsuchi. She instructed the woman to go to Kusa and find her husband. She said one more time that she would bring the woman's daughter back, and with that, she vanished from view with an adroit shunshin. As Kuratsuchi flew through the trees towards the woman's house at blinding speeds, she cursed her morals. Her ethical reasoning had told her to help the woman and rescue her daughter. In the back of her head, there was that underlying anxiety that had been trained into her, pertaining to the notion if the whole ordeal was a trap or not, but she ignored that because her paranoia was stepping over any of her better senses, a deadly fear that slid over her and was ready to flood the darker side of her heart. It was so close, and Kuratsuchi knew that this was going to push her over the edge. And somehow, she almost welcomed it. It would seem that she would not have to wait for Naruto for as long as she had initially thought. She also wondered if that was a good thing or not. A faint gust of wind blew from the ajar window, and the man turned his head to stare at it in mild suspicion. The breeze was short and brief enough to raise conjecture in the man. He stepped over to the window and closed it shut. For a tender moment, he stood still in place, waiting for an active second that did not come. After he deemed it to be trivial, he shrugged and turned his back to the glass. As if on cue, the window flew open by the strong pressure from the wind and the man was thrown to the ground by a figure that had seemed to appear from thin air. Naruto stood over the unconscious body and surveyed the area with his yellow-tinted eyes. He had mastered his control over nature chakra to the point where he could utilize its abilities for up to an hour until he needed to absorb more, unless of course he used all of the chakra at once. If he went into his Kurama mode or even his six-path sage mode, then he could make short work of the enemy, but he held himself back for the time being. A few shadow clones popped into existence silently next to the blonde. He had created these clones with a small amount of chakra again, seeing as his opponents were rather laughable in their toughness. Stealth was what mattered to Naruto, and when he concluded that he did not alarm any of the other guards in the vicinity, he signaled to Kusuai from the open window. Kusuai acknowledged him, and then performed a shunshin to his position. Naruto nodded silently to the jonin, and they moved through the upper floor. Naruto could sense all of the men in the compound, and he knew that one of the guards was stationary on this floor, and only one other would patrol through it every 30 minutes or so. Naruto quickly hid his body against the paneling of a nearby door. His clones followed suit. Kusuai hid farther down the hallway, allowing Naruto to take out the guard who was scheduled to stroll past the blonde at any moment. Naruto remained hidden and quiet until the footsteps of the anticipated guard were heard coming up the adjacent stairwell. Before the guard got closer, Naruto was grateful, not for the first time that day, that there seemed to be no sensor types among the bandits. When the guard was less than an arm's reach from him, Naruto shot his hand out towards the man's neck to quickly incapacitate him. After the guard fell, Naruto moved up the stairwell with a careful burst of speed. Kusuai followed. The clones stayed back to stand guard. Naruto approached the solid door made of oak that was the entrance into the main room. Naruto could sense 4 men in that room and what was most likely their leader. He was the man with the greatest chakra reserves, so Naruto surmised that it was their leader. He indicated with his head to Kusuai to handle the bandit that was closest to the door on the right-hand side. Kusuai nodded in comprehension, and with that, Naruto kicked open the oak door with perfect precision. In almost one fluid motion, Naruto performed a breathtaking account of offensive strategy that would have made his masters proud. While Kusuai brought out a kunai to eliminate his target, Naruto created another clone to knock out the far guard to his left. The other 2 guards were close enough for Naruto to leap forward and launch an outstretched leg into one of the men's skulls and his arm reaching around the leader's neck. Kusuai and Naruto's clone had made short work of their targets, and Naruto had a tight grip around the man with the large chakra reserves. It had all happened so fast that the man being held by Naruto still seemed dazed and unsure of the fact that he had been apprehended. What the dash? The bandit leader attempted to say until his voice was cut off by the strong force of Naruto's nature-enhanced hold. Tell your men to stand down, Naruto ordered. If you comply, we will make sure no harm comes to you or your men. The man smiled and choked out some incomprehensible gasps that he seemed to enjoy greatly. Naruto raised an eyebrow and lessened his grip. If only they would listen to little old me, the bandit said with a sick grin. Shit. He was not the leader. Naruto realized his mistake too late, and sensed all of the bandits in the compound flare their chakra. It was a trap. There must have actually been a sensor type among them, Naruto thought. One of them suddenly burst through the floors below and grabbed Kusuai from across the room. Naruto dropped the guard and was about to move to aid his comrade when all of the bandits made a direct attack on him. Some of them burst through the windows or floorboards, completely disregarding any obstacles to get to him. Naruto quickly created multiple clones around himself. Unfortunately, the bandits were more skillful than he anticipated. Perhaps they were not laughable. His clones were being dispersed at alarming speeds around him. He noticed that many of the bandits had headbands with slash symbols, identifying them as missing nin. Kusuai was not doing well. The missing nin's hold was overwhelmingly powerful and left him unable to move whatsoever. The shinobi's burly arms were wrapped around Kusuai's lithe figure, preventing him from struggling. Kusuai's hesitation was stronger than ever. He did not want to fight back. He did not want to do anything. He surrendered to his fear. He gave up on himself before he even tried. Even if he escaped from the man's grasp, there were multiple enemies around him, and they would kill him instantly. Why was he even here? Naruto seemed to have his hands full, but he could manage. He would survive, of course. Kusuai would probably die. The crack was still so small, after all. Naruto's voice reverberated through the large room. Kusuai! The hammer came down hard and split the iron. Someone believed in him. In that moment, Kusuai knew what it felt like to be a feather, weightless. He ascended past his old self, past his old doubts, past his hesitation. He wondered if he had ever felt this before. He decided that it did not really matter. Naruto had called out to Kusuai in desperation. For a moment, Kusuai's chakra was dangerously low. Considering he had barely used his chakra, this was quite odd. He could still sense the Jonin's chakra, so he was not dead yet. At this point, the entire gang of bandits were in the main room and Naruto was having trouble taking them out. There were so many of them that it became difficult on discerning who to strike first, and whether to worry about the other 6 trying to stab him or not. He decided on hitting the closest one and working from there. He threw a punch behind himself and broke a man's nose. He was going to need to put more chakra into his clones after all, and right before Naruto was about to do so, he heard Kusuai's voice. A yell that was so uncharacteristic and chakra that was so raw and strong blasted from the small shinobi that Naruto was uncertain it was even Kusuai he was looking at. Suddenly, the young Jonin broke from his captor's hold and clapped his hands together. A great burst of strong wind erupted from Kusuai's body that rivaled the power of Naruto's Raisin Shuriken. It did not nearly have the same control as the S-rank technique, and it probably wasted the entirety of the Jonin's chakra. But because of the size of the room and the amount of people there, it had devastating effects. The bandits circled and flew across the room from the sheer strength of the cyclone. Naruto held himself against a nearby wall and braced himself against Kusuai's power. The bandits were not so lucky and many of them flew from the building and all were either knocked unconscious or killed by Kusuai's technique. After what felt like hours of hurricane-like winds, the gales ceased. Kusuai felt his body become heavy again, although this time it was because of chakra defiancy. Kusuai saw darkness as he heard Naruto's voice calling out to him. His weight was broken and he could finally fly to whatever heights he wished to reach. As Kusuai saw black cover his eyes, he wondered if the sand really was lonely after all. Chapter 7. The Art of Shattering. Kuratsuchi had smelled the black plume of smoke before she had seen it. She made it to the woman's home before the light had gone and night was fast approaching. It was no surprise to her to find the remains of the woman's house to be half-burnt and smoldering with blackened boards of wood among the embers. She assumed it to be the woman's house due to the fact that there were no other houses within the vicinity. The fire had mostly died out because of the haste and carelessness put into torching the small building. Meager fires were scattered throughout the ruined home and Kuratsuchi quickly began to scan the area to find clues as to where the rogues had gone. She had barely even surveyed the area for a minute when she found crushed patches of grass leading away from the house. These guys may be amateurs and careless, but that did not make them any less dangerous, she thought. They could still harm the poor girl they had captured. She followed the footsteps and the trampled grass and saw they were directed north towards the mountains that were the southern border of Tsuchi no Kuni. Kuratsuchi narrowed her eyes and remembered that there were many caves and tunnels in those mountains, a perfect hideout for bandits and robbers. Kuratsuchi started to see stars peeking out into the sky as she traveled north. They showered their placid hope upon her, promising something she was uncertain of and pondered if she ever would. The stars gave her what they could and she was thankful for that much. For a scant moment, she was enraptured by the beauty surrounding her and forgot of her self-appointed mission. After the second passed and her will steeled, she hastened her pace and remembered her purpose. The dark reality of Kuratsuchi's duty wrapped its oily essence around her mind as she jumped through the trees towards the mountains. She could only hope the girl was still alive. It was probably too much to ask she was unspoiled. Kuratsuchi knew how these things worked, and the truth was when a group of men abducted a young woman, there was almost always a common outcome that broke morality to its core. She tried to prepare her mind for what was most likely to come, but she knew it really was not going to help much. As Kuratsuchi approached the large, rocky mountains, she was able to make out the steep walls of earth that jutted high above the forest. Inside of these tan cliffs were holes of varying sizes that served as entrances to a myriad of tunnels that ran through the roots of the mountains. Some of the natural tunnels could lead an explorer to the other side of the mountains where the rocky valley that held IWA was located. Most of them were dead ends, however. Kuratsuchi had ventured into numerous shafts and pits in her youth, and knew the channels of earth well. Despite her familiarity with the tunnels, it would be difficult to locate the group of men unless they were reasonably close to the south side of the mountains. By the time the moon had reached its apex in the broad sky, Kuratsuchi stood in front of the sheer rock cliff that was the beginning of the mountain range. The tracks ended there at the cliff. Her eyes scanned the black holes dotted throughout the wall. Regardless of the bandits' slovenliness, she guessed they were probably shinobi that were relatively low class. She had heard from her grandfather in one of his letters that a reasonable number of genin and chunin had abandoned IWA in recent years due to the lack of missions after the war, as well as a fair portion of jealousy between the civilians and the shinobi of the village. Compared to the general IWA NEEM population, it did not make a significant shift, but they were still out there with no order. A trained warrior who have lost their discipline is a dangerous one, she thought. She prayed that the bandits were not of former IWA affiliation. She was smart enough to know her prayers were futile. After careful examination, Kuratsuchi noticed that one of the cave entrances positioned about 100 feet above her had a multitude of worn-out stone fragments and cracks on its edge, indicating extended use. Kuratsuchi ran vertically up the cliff without a second thought, and she thanked her well-trained chakra control for allowing such an act. When she reached the mouth of the cave, she observed the smooth, battered rock near the edge and the shifted gravel that announced the presence of many bodies. The tunnel was wide enough for a plethora of people to move in and out of its depths seamlessly. Kuratsuchi took a long, drawn-out breath to steady herself and her worries. She had to be vigilant and disciplined in this endeavor. Kuratsuchi took one last, lingering gaze at the starry sky and entered the dark foundations of the mountains. The moonlight was gone before long, and Kuratsuchi promptly flowed chakra into her sharp eyes to allow her some sight in the darkness, although her vision was not nearly as keen as it would be with natural light. For a time, the tunnel remained flat and straight, and then suddenly, it dropped to a steady decline. She descended down the enclosed path that twisted and turned but never diverted or grew smaller. After a considerable amount of time, Kuratsuchi saw a glow that disturbed her chakra-enhanced vision, and she stopped the flow. She also heard voices emitting from the glow, and she moved towards it in silent practice. As she neared the glow, the voices became more distinct, and she concluded them to be male. When she heard a female voice scream, she tensed but also felt a wave of relief wash over her. She was still alive, at least. In the moments leading up to Kuratsuchi reaching the end of the tunnel, she debated if the girl being alive was actually a good thing. When Kuratsuchi arrived at the source of the glow, and saw the spectacle surrounding it, she felt her blood heat up. The tunnel opened up into an expansive cave that rose high above the ground for a few hundred feet, and was abounding with stalactites and stalagmites collectively. In the center of the large cave was a ring of several fires and a party of men in a tight circle. Kuratsuchi could make out the girls' screams and the men's cheers and laughs as they defiled her. Kuratsuchi felt her rage boil at the hideous, unspeakable act before her. Her entire body was rigid with fury, and she balled her fists while focusing earth-natured chakra into them. The chakra hardened her skin like armor, and with a strong burst of speed, Kuratsuchi dashed into the cave. The large group of men barely even noticed her as they molested the young girl until it was too late. A hardened fist smashed into one of the men's faces at such alarming speed that the man's skull caved in, and he was shot upwards towards the cave ceiling. The men, having been caught with their pants down, gaped at the terrifying sight of a rosy-eyed kunoichi glaring at them with pure enmity. She stood in the center of the ring of men, and they backed away from her in shock and terror. Kuratsuchi stood over the weeping and naked girl with a defensive stance. She noted that none of the men had headbands of any sort. She quickly deduced that either they were not shinobi, or they had discarded their bands long ago. She disposed of the former notion when she recognized some of the faces in the crowd to be missing Nin from IWA. The fire in Kuratsuchi's chest became ablaze when one of the men leered at her. "Looky here, fellas. We got another one here to join us." The men's initial surprise had faded at their companion's utterance. They began to nod in agreement and smiled dreadfully in Kuratsuchi's direction. Her vision became a blur of anger in that moment. She did not think these men were so careless and conceited as to not bow to the rational fears she imbued, but she was wrong. The man who had spoken in brazen foolishness stepped forward, drawing out a rusty kunai. The piercing, red-hot glare in Kuratsuchi's eyes was enough to daunt any man that possessed even an inkling of common sense. Evidently, there was a shortage of such sense among the party of bandits. "Come here. We will have loads of F-." The man's invitation and life was cut short when Kuratsuchi launched her fist into his torso. The man's rib cage collapsed like a paper bowl underneath a mountain, and he flew into the group of men behind him. The force of his body pushed a wave of men to the ground. Actual panic became evident in the men's eyes at the strength of the kunoichi. Some of the men in the crowd began to recognize her, and shouted that she was the Tsuchikage's granddaughter. When this happened, a frenzy of different events transpired simultaneously. Some of the men stood their guard, others ran towards the only exit of the cave, while the rest remained paralyzed in fear. Kuratsuchi quickly slammed her hands into the earth and made the ground rise up to cover the exit to the outside before any of the men had a chance to escape. Some of the men that ran had earth affinities and tried desperately to remove the blockage, but Kuratsuchi was too fast. She jumped high up into the air and used her lava release and water trumpet technique to shoot forward a hardening agent of quicklime that trapped all of the men located around the exit. She then fell to the floor of the cave with her hardened fist smashing into the earth. All of the surrounding men were caught in the destruction and impact of the attack. Rocks crumbled around them and fell from the ceiling as well as collapsing underneath their feet. The men began to scream and holler with none of them having any more false courage to stand against the terrifying woman. Kuratsuchi darted around the cave, attacking, punching, kicking, burning, burying, and ultimately killing every man that remained. In the end, none were spared and a heavy amount of misaligned corpses and rubble surrounded Kuratsuchi. She stood in place with a loss of breath and attempted to regain her composure. She had not been that angry in a very long time and had lost herself in her fury, something that was directly discouraged among shinobi. After Kuratsuchi had calmed down and was in control once again, she walked towards the trembling form of the victimized girl. Her naked body was beaten and her porcelain skin was colored by bruises. Seeing her pitiful state made Kuratsuchi's anger reignite for a moment. She reached her hand out to the wide-eyed girl. "Junko? I've come to take you home." Kuratsuchi tried to keep her voice as tender and steady as it had been with the girl's mother earlier that day, hoping it would elicit a positive response. Unfortunately, it did not. The madness and horror in Junko's eyes were great enough to indicate the loss of sense and reason of her reality. She screamed in a jumble of incomprehensible jargon and crawled away from her savior. Kuratsuchi could only gaze at her in pain and grief. She had been too late. The girl's will was broken and there was nothing left in her mind but insanity. Junko shouted out some unintelligible drivel and ran off towards one of the fallen bodies. Kuratsuchi stared at her in puzzlement and then with horror when she saw what the girl was doing. Junko had reached for the man's rusted, yet still partly sharp kunai and raised it to her neck. Kuratsuchi may have been fast, in fact she probably was fast enough to have done something in that horrible second, but something had slowed her advancement. Something in Junko's eyes spoke of helplessness and mania that somehow resonated within the dark-haired kunoichi. Something that shattered dreams as well as reality. Something inky and dreadful that finally flooded Kuratsuchi's soul. After the rusted kunai had done its work and she had carried Junko's lifeless body out of the mountain and into the growing light, Kuratsuchi looked at the sunrise to the east. She wondered how a world that carried such beauty could also carry such awful pain. Kuratsuchi had seen the evils of mankind and the harsh reality of what the world was before in her life, but nothing compared to the feeling of emptiness in Kuratsuchi's stomach. The feeling of pure dismay that enveloped her, and she pondered if anything could ever eradicate it. Perhaps time would help, or maybe it would be cruel. One thing was for sure, the sunrise certainly did not help. "You didn't mention that your chakra nature was wind." Those were the first words that Kusai heard when he opened his eyes. He turned his head to see a smug Naruto with amusement blazing in his strong eyes. Kusai smiled weakly at his friend. His whole body was in agony, and it felt like his blood had been replaced with lead. He was lying in a large hospital bed in what must have been the infirmary ward in Suna. He could smell the cleaning products and antiseptic throughout the small room the two shinobi were in. He could hear the muffled chatter of nurses and sounds of medical practice outside in the adjacent hallway. "I didn't think it was that significant," Kusai uttered with a numbness in his throat. "What exactly happened?" Naruto was seated on a stool next to Kusai's bed, and he straightened his back when Kusai asked his question. "Well, you exceeded my expectations, that's for sure. After the plan failed, I created my shadow clones and they got beaten pretty quickly. I purposely made them weaker than they normally would be to see if you would act on it. In hindsight, I shouldn't have held myself back as much as I did. You could have gotten really hurt. I've been trying to control my strength, but I haven't quite gotten it right yet. Still." Naruto paused and a proud smile formed on his lips as he looked at Kusai. If the young jonin was asked to describe the feeling he had at that moment, he would have said that was impossible. "You took all of them out with a single jutsu." Kusai's expression was something close to disbelief mixed with happiness. Naruto cleared his throat and continued his explanation. "The jutsu was wind-natured and so strong that you used almost all of your chakra reserves. You could have died if I didn't give you some of my chakra to hold you over until we got here. If we weren't in such an enclosed space at the time, then I'm sure things would have gone differently. There's also the fact that you focused your chakra flow into the nature transformation almost perfectly. Normally, your chakra wouldn't have expanded like that. Kusai's eyes widened as the reality of his actions was being revealed to him. I guess what I'm saying is that not only did you get lucky, but you showed what you're capable of. Kusai was speechless by this revelation, and even though he wanted to thank Naruto, he was unable to find the words. Fortunately, Naruto seemed to understand the situation and stood up after giving the Jonin a bright grin. Good work, Kusai. Keep training and you'll do fine. Kusai finally found his voice. Is that what you did? Naruto's smile became pensive, and he looked down at his bandaged hand, flexing ever so slightly. Yeah, there were times where it was all I had. At least, it felt like that. But I remember that when I realized what made me strong were the friends that supported me, it showed me who carried the real strength, the ones who believed in me. Kusai was starting to organize his thoughts. Is that what makes a person great? The people around him? Is that how you became strong? Naruto seemed slightly taken aback by the piercing questions, but he smiled, nonetheless. I think it was part of that. I think strength is also what you put into it, and that's different for every person. Naruto's eyes narrowed with wistfulness in his smile. Kusai thought he looked the happiest at that moment. There are some things you have to learn yourself. He paused to think on what he had said. And some things you have to learn from others, but what if those things are hard to hear? His voice became lower. Or hard to do? Naruto was relieved by Kusai's vulnerability all of a sudden. Just because something is hard or even impossible, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. His eyes were cooled with solemnity. Kusai had heard that answer before and was not satisfied by it. That doesn't make any sense. There are things that are foolish even to attempt. Naruto's face became stern, but his voice carried no disrespect or anger. That's true, but that list is not as long as people like to think. Naruto took a deep breath and noticed Kusai was waiting for him to elaborate. We're all humans and we're all flawed, but that doesn't mean that we can't do great things. You took out almost 50 men with a single jutsu. Before that, you would have said such a feat was impossible. Kusai was baffled by that statement, and knew he did not possess grounds to retort. I've had comrades that would have died if I stayed idle. If I said it was impossible to do anything, Naruto continued. I'm strong now because of the mindset I had for most of my life. I learned early on that giving up before I even tried, giving into my emotions and hesitation already makes me a failure. Naruto's eyes were bright and strong and his voice had a powerful essence to it. Kusai would have sworn that the room shook from its power. But why? Why do you try? There are other people out there that are far stronger. People that possess what others don't. Shouldn't they be the ones to help? Kusai's voice felt weak in comparison to the strength of the man's before him. Don't you see? I was weak and stupid once, but I knew that I wouldn't be forever. It all worked out because I can save them all now. I can take care of my friends. I'm not held back by my doubts, and you don't need to be either, Kusai. You can grow and learn. Stop comparing yourself to others and stop doubting yourself. Your flaws and uncertainty don't define you. You don't have to rise above me, you only have to rise above your old self. Kusai's eyes widened and Naruto's words sunk into him. He had never heard of those concepts before. His entire philosophy was shattering and a new one was being built up in its place. He had to suddenly cope with it, but the speed of what was transpiring was far greater. Naruto was right. His worries and mistakes did not define who he was. The impossible was not as great as he had initially thought. He was stronger and wiser than the Kusai a week ago, a day ago, even a second ago. The reality of reason was fusing itself into his inner mind and he looked up at Naruto with comprehension. I want to help them all too. Kusai's voice was quiet and full of raw emotion. I want to save all of them too, even if they're not my friends. Even though they see me as a nuisance and a failure, I want to be there for them. Kusai's eyes started to brim with moisture, and hot tears cascaded down his face. Naruto smiled tenderly down at his friend and nodded in relief. He got through to him. Then tell them that, Naruto said with the same degree of tenderness his smile had. The tears stopped and Kusai looked up at Naruto with extreme perplexity. Naruto grinned and walked towards the door to the hallway. The whole village heard about what you did, Naruto said to Kusai as he poked his head out the door to yell. Come on in. Kusai's jaw dropped when villagers and Sunanin alike came tumbling into the small room. They all had looks of concern and pride in their eyes when they saw the Jonin. The number of cheers and praises from so many people that had once given him disgusted looks were staggering. They clapped him on the back, hugged him, and congratulated him for what he did. A woman whose son had been killed by the bandits was crying in Kusai's lap and thanking him for avenging his son. Giant men that had never given him the time of day were bawling like children when they saw that Kusai's condition was fine. They had worried about me, Kusai thought. Emotions were rampant in the small room, and it was like a great dam was finally broken for the villagers of Sunagakure. Kusai shed even more tears that day because now he could become stronger than ever. He could help all of them now, like Naruto had helped him. He had found what he was missing. He was not going to hesitate anymore. The weight was gone, after all. Naruto smiled and left the room as more people crowded the hallway to get into the hospital room. He had told the doctors his intentions beforehand, and they had kept telling him that it would greatly bother their patient to have so many people in there. Naruto responded by telling them it was probably the best medicine anyone could be given. In the end, he won. Gaara was standing at the end of the long hallway, and Naruto made his way over to his old friend. "Did you always know that he could perform that jutsu?" Naruto asked with an amused smirk. Gaara gave his own version of a smirk to the war hero. "I had a hunch. It's a very unstable jutsu that Kusai probably never knew he could do. There were reports of him having an unusual chakra flow when his teachers gave him instruction on how to control his wind transformation. I did some research and found out about the chakra usage and principles regarding the low-ranking, yet potent jutsu. Although, it's more like a giant burst of chakra than it is a technique." The boy was very lucky. Naruto gave his friend a toothy grin. He sure did. If he keeps training and controls that flow of chakra, he could end up rivaling you, Gaara. Gaara smiled at his old friend and let out an uncharacteristic chuckle that few people have heard. He just might. Naruto's expression became more serious, and he looked at Gaara with careful eyes. "He showed me something that I forgot about, Gaara." Gaara had been hoping for that. What it was like to have potential again. "I remember that I used to be so weak in the bottom of my class, but none of that mattered when I had great friends to help me along the way." Naruto had a smile that spoke of leaves and wind. "I was reminded of that." Gaara smiled warmly and nodded to his friend. "I'm glad to hear it, Naruto." Naruto stepped past the redhead and began to walk away from him. Gaara stayed where he was. "Where will you go now?" Naruto stopped and paused to think of an answer. He thought of pink roses and the strong, earthy soil they were planted in. He thought of a woman that he really wanted to see again. He turned to his friend and gave him a smile that reminded Gaara of when they were younger and times were simpler. A place with potential. Gaara seemed satisfied with that answer. After Suna's great cliffs were gone from view and the summer sun burned brightly in the cloudless sky, Naruto still thought of roses. As he reached the top of a sand dune, he allowed those thoughts to wander. Naruto yearned to see the woman of his affections again. He was not sure what actions he would take when he saw her or what condition she would be in, but he knew for certain that he was going to relish every second he was given with her. There was something about Kuratsuchi that interested him, and something that terrified him. It might have been from uncertainty, or it might have been from ignorance. Either way, Naruto was curious as to what would happen next. Chapter 8. We Push Aside. One of the hardest moments of Kuratsuchi's life was to tell two parents she could not save their daughter. Her return had been sluggish because with every step, she knew her regret was corroding the tender flesh of her heart. She had finally returned to the ruined home when the sun had passed most of its course in the cloudy sky, hoping to find the parents there. Unfortunately, her assumption was right. She had not been looking forward to dealing with their predictable reactions. When Kuratsuchi saw the woman's husband, her first thought was that he had the same eyes that Junko did. That thought felt like a drop of water in her stomach which, surprisingly, increased the sense of emptiness in it. Junko's father had wept with his wife when they saw their daughter's corpse. Kuratsuchi lied to them, saying she had been too late to rescue her, and the men had killed her before she had found them. She felt the truth was just too pernicious. She told them all of the men were eliminated and they would no longer pose a threat. The couple tried to compensate Kuratsuchi with money for her trouble, but she respectfully refused. In her mind, she did nothing to deserve it. When Junko's mother had wailed her sorrows into the heated afternoon, Kuratsuchi felt a dark chill creep through her blood. The chill was a thought that clipped the feathers of hope and made a woman question why the world was the way it was. No matter what she or any shinobi did, there would always be evil intent in human hearts, and it felt like they built their castles in the sand. It was pointless. Everything Kuratsuchi did was pointless. She could not save this woman's daughter, so the world and Kuratsuchi's heart were made colder for it. Kuratsuchi had fought strong enemies, witnessed the betrayal of close friends, and endured the greatest war the world had ever seen, but somehow this girl's death wrecked her. It tore into the spirit and pulled her down to a miserable level of icy convictions. She had failed and there was nothing she could do to change it. Despite her suffering, she knew it was nothing compared to the parents bawling in front of her. Her own tears did not come. She helped them with the burial process by forming a hole in the ground and staying for a small ceremony that took the remainder of the day. After that, Kuratsuchi shared her condolences and best wishes, then left them with silent footsteps. That night, the stars and moon illuminated the earth and its inky essence. The leaves of the trees reflected the silvery glow, letting the forest drink the ghostly light. Kuratsuchi trekked along the path in an abstracted state of mind. She was a disciplined shinobi of IWA, but the sense of helplessness was clutching her spirit like cold fingers. She knew she was headed in the direction of Kusa, but she almost did not care. If everything was pointless, then why did going to Kusa and seeing Naruto matter? What did feelings of love and affection have to do with a world filled with evil? Kuratsuchi did not have an answer. When Kuratsuchi really thought about it, she realized that what was really bothering her was the fact she could have done something. She could have prevented all of it from happening. Kuratsuchi could have stopped the kunai from reaching Junko's throat, but she had hesitated. She could have moved, but she stopped herself. Her thinking had prevented her from moving. Why? She kept playing the horrific scene through her head over and over again, but she was so unsure about what she was thinking about in that cloudy second. Why did she do that? She did not know what had happened, and in the depths of her heart she did not want to, because if she knew why she had done it, then she would be admitting to the reality of her mistake. She wanted to forget reality, if only for a little while. After the moon had moved a significant distance, Kuratsuchi became too weary to continue. It was not a physical weariness but a mental one. She was drained. She stopped in place, and for the first time that night, she took note of her surroundings. She heard the sound of water trickling close by and left the path to investigate. Several meters away from the path, hidden amid the brush, she found a quaint pool that rippled from a steady flow of water above it. The small waterfall was rather soft in its noise-making and generated a peaceful atmosphere around the pool. The pool resembled silver because of the moon's glow, and Kuratsuchi stepped near it to peer into its watery body. She saw her reflection there. Her pink eyes mingled with the silvery light, forming an amalgamated painting of faded colors. She examined her features and questioned her existence for a soft moment. It was then that the tears came like a wave. The salty drops rippled in the pool and muddled her appearance. Kuratsuchi had failed, and there was nothing she could do to change it. She wanted to find release, and weeping was not fitting her needs. After a considerable amount of time passed filled with teardrops, Kuratsuchi knelt in a gentle patch of grass near the pool to rest her enervated body. She fell asleep to the tender sound of the waterfall and the creamy glow of the moon. Perhaps her dreams would not be as pointless as her reality. Naruto's sun-kissed hair swayed with the gentle breeze as the morning light shone down on him through the leaves. He always loved the way the light hit the trees, producing a bright, emerald canopy above him that spoke of majesty. He appreciated the way nature would bless the world with its beautiful simplicity. Naruto had been traveling for a protracted amount of time. For some reason that he did not quite comprehend, his feet were moving quicker than he had been initially commanding them to. Earlier, he had stopped a traveling merchant on the side of the road to inquire if Kusa was close by. The merchant had said he was only about an hour away. That had happened 30 minutes ago. Naruto was perplexed by his speed but did not dwell on it for longer than he needed to. As Naruto traveled down the wooded path, he patted the scroll in his cloak and smiled from the lovely words that were concealed within it. Kakashi had finally replied the night before, and Naruto was still lingering on the helpful and kind advice the Hokage had written. He had only read it twice, but the words were etched into his memory, hopefully for good. Dear Naruto, thank you for the report. I hope the endeavor involving the rogues bodes well for you. As for your honest request about Kuratsuchi, I am quite flattered that you would trust me with that information. I understand that you're uncertain about your feelings concerning the opposite sex, and that's perfectly normal. You're being very mature by requesting advice, and I'm so proud of you, Naruto. It takes a strong man to ask for help. Your parents would be proud too. Regarding Kuratsuchi, I suggest that you learn more about her. Find out as much as you can, and then once you obtain enough information on who she is, you can then consider if you want to take the next step in the relationship. The important thing is to communicate. Let her know how you feel when you feel it is necessary. She deserves to know just as much as you should know her feelings, whether romantic or otherwise, about you. Trust your intuition, Naruto. It has helped you out in the past, after all. I look forward to your next report. Good luck, Naruto. Sincerely, Kakashi Hatake, Rokudame Hokage. After reading it, Naruto had missed his old teacher more than ever. He knew that every word on the scroll was as sincere as the man who had written it. He wanted to see Kakashi and all of his friends in Konoha, but he was not ready. He would see them again, he told himself. It would just take some more time. With every step that Naruto took, his excitement grew. He was going to see Kuratsuchi again, the woman that had been plaguing his thoughts for over a week now. Kakashi's words seemed to be ringing in the stillness of his mind. Let her know how you feel. He wished it was that simple. When he read that portion of the letter, his stomach seemed to drop at the very thought of telling her how he felt. How could he do that when he did not even know what they were? There was no way he could simply describe his feelings in detail. However, knowing Kakashi believed in him seemed to boost his confidence. Perhaps he did not need to describe them but say them. She would understand, he thought. She would probably appreciate his honesty, and his courage strengthened at the prospect. So it was decided. He would tell Kuratsuchi his feelings for her. Naruto's grin was wide and his spirits were high as the sunny forest seemed to reflect his mood. He was so cheerful he almost did not notice the subtle movement of grass in the distance. Luckily, Naruto's instincts were disciplined enough for his ears to hear the unnatural noise of the grass being shifted. He stopped suddenly and his eyes steeled over in preparation. He swiftly moved through the dense foliage off the side of the path without making an audible sound of any kind. Naruto almost broke his cover when he saw what was on the other side of the brush. The woman of his recent dreams was sleeping next to a clear spring, and he froze in place when he realized it was Kuratsuchi. He was only a few meters from her resting form, and Naruto could not help but stare at how beautiful she appeared. Her breathing was rhythmic and heavy, indicating that she was in a deep sleep. Naruto took those still moments to examine her. Her lips were peachy and full with a hint of cherry color to them. Her cheekbones were elevated to an attractive degree, but not too high to where they were prim. She had a sharp nose that bared some contrast with the warm arc of the bone structure it ended in. The curves of her body were like hills and valleys of endless blandishment. He did not really get to appreciate the fullness of her hips the last time they had seen each other. They were exquisitely wider than they were during the war. She was wrapped in her travel cloak, so he was disappointed to not see any of her exposed skin. He kicked himself mentally at that thought. She was a human being, not an object. Naruto then realized he would be in some serious danger if she awoke to find him staring at her while she was asleep. If she was anything like Sakura, and he was fairly certain she was, then he would be counting on a giant lump on his head if she awoke. So, Naruto took the safe approach. Kuratsuchi? His voice was not too loud nor too soft, the perfect volume to awake a sleeping woman. When Kuratsuchi opened her eyelids and her flushed eyes were revealed to the morning light, Naruto froze once again. Despite his adroit perception skills, Naruto was having trouble trying to discern the emotions and thoughts in Kuratsuchi's eyes. The stoic, salmon-colored orbs confessed almost nothing to his deduction skills. There was only one mental state that was so prevalent in her soul, yet it was only for a careful second he was able to decipher what it was: pain. Her finely trimmed eyebrows furrowed slightly at Naruto's presence, though not out of anger but confusion. Naruto? The eyebrows widened. Naruto! What I? She paused for a moment, then looked at her surroundings and her current position. Kuratsuchi's face was the same shade as her eyes when she quickly stood up. She did not like being caught off guard. Her uncharacteristic stuttering was a testament to that. How long have you been standing there? It was Naruto's turn to blush. I just got here actually, he lied. In her frantic state, Kuratsuchi seemed to buy it. Oh, well. Fantastic. She took another pause to collect her thoughts. When she had opened her eyes, she thought she had still been dreaming. Her dreams had been filled with the same hues of yellow and blue that were currently in front of her, and it had embarrassed her to realize it. Finally, she seemed to be in control of herself and made a sharp intake of sweet air into her lungs. Did you need something? Her question bounced around the watery glade, the sound of the small waterfall mingling with the innocent words. Naruto was taken aback by the question. Suddenly, all of his confidence seemed to fall down his throat and into the pit of his stomach. He could not tell her, after all. Well, we agreed to meet up again, right? In Kusa? Kuratsuchi's eyes reflected some well-concealed surprise at the revelation. Given yesterday's circumstances, she had forgotten about the hopeful reunion or, at least, misplaced the joy of the rapprochement. Yes, of course. She recovered well enough to where it seemed natural, even to Naruto. She surveyed the clearing they were in. Although, I do believe this is not Kusa. The gentle smirk Kuratsuchi gave Naruto made his blood pulse far quicker than normal. He could not help but participate in the playful banter he had missed so much. You have a good eye. He mirrored her smirk, which increased the curvature of her lips. However, we're not far from the outskirts. She tilted her head, which caused her ebony, shoulder-length locks to careen to the side of her face. Is that so? There was a quick moment of silence as she aligned her thoughts. Then would you care to accompany me on the way there, hero? I have some business there that I must attend to. Naruto felt his veins surge at the suggestion. She had a funny way of getting what she wanted without making it seem like she was too eager. Naruto was not too keen on this fact yet, however. He nodded. Sure, I'd be happy to. Kuratsuchi turned her body towards the direction of the path but stopped dead in her tracks when Naruto asked an abrupt question. Why were you out here anyways? Couldn't you have slept in town? Naruto's inquiry reverberated in the confines of her mind, paralyzing her. The events of the night before gripped her soul. In her shock, it had all slipped her mind. There was some relief in knowing the blonde man had been able to make her forget about it, if only for a little while. Nevertheless, her fear and regret flooded her senses. Everything was pointless, she reminded herself. She shook her head, trying to shake away the terrible thoughts that invaded her duty and character. She could not let it control her. She could not let it take away her joy. Somehow, it was not too difficult to push it all aside, although she was uncertain for how long that would last. She realized she had been staying in place for too long due to the fact that Naruto was raising an eyebrow at her in mild curiosity, waiting for her answer. She thought he looked cute in that moment. She shook that thought away too. Let's go, she announced as she pushed through the fresh vegetation on the way to the path, leaving Naruto's question unanswered. He did not press the issue further. Naruto followed after her without investigating her odd behavior. Naruto scrunched his face in speculation as he tried to discern what that look meant earlier, as he followed behind her. For one split moment, Naruto had seen the pain in her eyes again. This time, however, it was much more concentrated. It had been similar to the center of a whirlpool, a swirl of agonizing water that struck the cold ocean of distress. When she had looked back at him, he had tried to seem as disinterested as possible about the matter, but he could not completely mask his concern. Naruto wanted to think longer on the subject, but his thoughts were cut short when Kuratsuchi spoke to him from up front. Aren't you going to ask what my business is in Kusa? A playful glint was in her eyes, just like it had been in AIM. Naruto had forgotten how much he had missed that glint. He shrugged. I figured that you would tell me eventually. His smirk was wide enough to show teeth. Or I would have figured it out myself. Kuratsuchi narrowed her eyes at him, trying to detect whether that was a jab or a subtle inclination to their relationship. She decided it was probably neither. I'm going to formally invite Kuzugakure to the Shinobi Union. Now that AIM has joined, the Union is trying to recruit every village we can get. Because of you, Naruto, it's made things a lot easier. Kuratsuchi had expected the blonde hero to swell with pride at that announcement, but she had been pleasantly surprised. Instead, Naruto quickened his pace to reach her. They were now walking side by side along the path with Naruto on Kuratsuchi's right. He grinned brightly at her, and she could feel blood rush to the tip of her nose. How could he make her do that? She barely knew the guy, yet no man had ever made her feel this way. As if he was reading her thoughts, Naruto said, "What's your favorite season?" She appeared to be perturbed by his questioning. Her innate reaction was to be flustered and begin her stuttering again, but she pushed that down with sheer will. What? Where did that come from? Naruto's smile softened slightly but kept its brilliance. He had wanted to ask a much deeper question, one pertaining to why she was in so much pain. Of course, he knew he would not have gotten an answer, so he decided on trying to get to know her better. Kakashi's advice was his best bet, after all. I don't know, he replied as a chuckle escaped his lips. Is there something wrong with wanting to know your favorite season? Don't answer my question with another question. It's still an answer though. She was about to retort, but the logic behind his absurd reasoning gave her pause. After a few breathy seconds of ruminating, she gave in. Autumn. She glanced at him. Autumn is my favorite season. Naruto did not take long to respond. Why? She looked forward and stared up at the olive-colored canopy above them. There's a lot of reasons. The changing colors for one thing. It's kind of like spring but the opposite. The world adjusts itself for a time of rest in autumn. A time where things get colder but only so they can get warm again. But that was her old philosophy though, was it not? After Junko's death, everything in her worldview had changed. She had realized the whole world was always cold, and was always filled with evil. Warmth and goodness were just an illusion. Why could she not say that, though? Around Naruto, she could barely even think about all of that. How was he able to do that? Did she actually believe what she had said? She did not feel like she was lying. For some reason, Kuratsuchi had trouble feeling depressed around the effervescent man. Naruto's grin made Kuratsuchi think the sun's rays had broken through the trees. She looked up to check. It had not. Couldn't say it better myself. That's why it's my favorite too. Kuratsuchi could tell he was being sincere and smirked at him. For a couple minutes, neither of them said anything else until Kuratsuchi broke the silence. What's your favorite vegetable? Kusugakure was a small, but thriving village. Because of its invasion during the Third Shinobi World War, the village and the surrounding nation had suffered many casualties and had its infrastructure in ruin. After the war, the village had bounced back and became a successful shinobi village due to the shrewdness of its diplomatic leaders. Like many of the smaller shinobi villages, Kusugakure was not led by a kage but by a small council of leaders. The leaders were highly skilled in diplomacy and were all highly intelligent. They were known to be peaceful and honest men that had sided with Konoha with the utmost respect towards the great village. When the Fourth Shinobi World War ended, they had shared the same excitement and relief that the rest of the world had experienced. Kusa was shaped like a square with a grid-like structure of streets and alleys comprising its layout. The village was divided into 4 units of the square almost symmetrically. From the perspective of the cardinal directions, the square was shaped as a diamond with the point of the top quadrant facing the north. Because of this layout, the quadrants were logically called the north, south, east, and west quadrants. The main headquarters of the village was located at the southernmost point of the north quadrant, near the exact center of the village. That center was where the 4 quadrants intersected and formed another open square, earning it the name Center Square, another testament to the logical attitudes of the village's residents and founders. When Naruto and Kuratsuchi entered Center Square and the war hero was still not surrounded by fanatics or admirers, he visibly groaned his disappointment. He had learned the art of humility in recent years, but it was still a relatively new concept to him that he did not follow religiously. He was starting to like being recognized and admired by strangers wherever he went. Unfortunately for Naruto, the residents of Kusa were well known for being stoic and unenthusiastic unless they needed to be. He had received some waves and glances from the villagers, but it was nothing compared to what he was used to. Naruto was kind of hoping to see Kuratsuchi's reaction to him being the center of attention in a village they were not really associated with. At this point, he was grateful to get any reaction out of the pink-eyed Kunoichi. Every time the woman laughed, smiled, frowned, or depicted any form of emotion, Naruto felt like he understood the world a little better. If pushed for clarification on the matter, Naruto would say it actually made him want to understand the world better because then he would probably be able to explain why he liked her reactions so much. He hoped so, anyways. Kuratsuchi rolled her eyes at Naruto's visible dismay, her grief temporarily forgotten once again. Honestly, you're a real puzzle, hero. One minute you act all mature and intelligent, and the next you're practically a child. Naruto's mood drastically changed at her astute observation. His grin showed as much white as the puffy clouds in the sky. He was enjoying the fact that she was analyzing him. That's just what makes Naruto Uzumaki the complex individual that everyone loves. Kuratsuchi audibly sighed at his antics. Although, the subtle amusement she conveyed did not go by unnoticed. Truth be told, Naruto rarely acted like his old self these days except around those he was especially close to. He had wanted to not act this way around Kuratsuchi, but when he realized her reactions were rather positive, he could not help himself. It was basically impulsive, and he liked it that way. The headquarters is right there, Kuratsuchi said as she stepped towards the large building that was the hub of the village. Come on, hero. Naruto followed along as he marveled at the simplicity of the important building. It was a 2-story building with a single tower jutting up in the center of the block-like structure. The tower rose up for an additional 3 stories, and emblazoned upon the front wall of the tower was the kanji for grass. The building was surrounded by a concrete wall, and had 2 kusanin standing guard in front of it. When they saw the 2 strangers approach them, they became rigid and tense. Naruto threw them his most disarming smile from a distance, and one of them quickly recognized him. That's Naruto Uzumaki, the shinobi guard told his comrade standing next to him. The other guard narrowed his eyes in disbelief at the man in question. The famous war hero? Yes, and it looks like he is heading this way. Should we stop him? The first guard was bewildered by such an audacious statement. How do you stop one of the strongest men to ever live? I don't know, but it's our job to question anyone who wishes to see the council. The first guard gave a nervous chuckle. I don't think you understand. If that man wants to see the council, he will see the council. The second guard was about to say more when the blonde man that had been the focus of their discussion stood in between the two guards. Naruto grinned happily at them. Hello, my friends. Would you mind letting me and my companion here into the building? We have come on diplomatic means and we would like to. Yes. Of course. Go right ahead. The two guards exclaimed in unison. Naruto gave them both a quizzical expression, but wisely decided not to press the issue any further because of Kuratsuchi pushing him forward from behind. She called out a sing-song thank you to the two guards and the duo entered the Kusa headquarters. A young receptionist was sitting at a desk with a stack of papers placed next to her. She was scribbling something when the two shinobi walked in. She peered up at them with disinterest at first glance, but when she saw Naruto, her face became flushed. She was immediately intimidated by the handsome blonde, but she tried to maintain a professional demeanor as best she could. Hello? What may I do for you? She was only addressing Naruto, seeming to ignore Kuratsuchi altogether, much to the kunoichi's chagrin. Naruto did not seem to notice or care about the woman's batting eyelashes, but Kuratsuchi sure did. She could feel her patience thinning and her annoyance increasing at the way the young woman lusted at Naruto. Before the Jinchuriki could say anything else, the kunoichi spoke for him. We are here to see the council, if you do not mind. Her tone was razor-sharp and the receptionist flinched a little as if needles were piercing her. Naruto rubbed the nape of his neck and shot the receptionist an innocent smile that made the young woman's leg muscles loosen subconsciously. She immediately forgot about the needles then. We only need to see them for a few minutes. I would be extremely grateful if you would let us see them. I assure you it's of the utmost importance. The woman frowned in some form of reluctant regret, and merely glanced at Kuratsuchi from the corner of her eye. I'm afraid you need to have scheduled an appointment, and the council is not seeing anyone today. They are in an important meeting, you see. Subconsciously, Naruto expressed his disappointment by creasing his eyes slightly. The almost defeated look made the woman's heart melt into a puddle. It made even Kuratsuchi have a moment of pause. The woman's pitch was far higher than earlier. Well, if it really is important, I guess you can go in. It's up the stairs and down the hall. The receptionist gave Naruto a sultry smile. However, you can only go if you come see me again on your way out. That shouldn't be a prob. Naruto's words were cut off by Kuratsuchi pulling him by the ear. The fuming kunoichi dragged the war hero away from the desk without a word. Naruto pulled away from her strong grip when they reached the top of the stairs leading to the council room. What the hell was that for? Kuratsuchi looked unamused. For playing into that skank's hands. You should know better, hero. Naruto chuckled in a sheepish fashion and found himself unable to look at her in the eye. I was just being friendly. Kuratsuchi rolled her eyes once again and headed towards the council room without giving him any more attention on the matter. They stepped into a long hall and made their way to the end of it. At the end of the hall were two brightly painted, ornate doors that appeared to have costed more than was probably necessary. Kuratsuchi wasted no time by knocking heavily on the double doors. Naruto was honestly intrigued by her lack of tact. After a few moments of silence, the doors were opened from the inside and a small, robed man stood in front of them. His robes were similar to the ceremonial robes worn by the Kage, but without any form of headwear. The small man immediately recognized Naruto and was alarmed by the abrupt visit. Oh my! How may I help you? Naruto waved and smiled kindly to the short man. Kuratsuchi stepped forward and answered the man's question. The man seemed to just notice her presence, which increased the kunoichi's irritation. We're here on diplomatic circumstances from the Shinobi Union. The man's eyebrows were heightened by her announcement. Diplomatic, you say? A gleeful smile formed around the man's lips and he centered it at Naruto's presence with the addition of a nod to him. Why, yes. This is perfect. Please come in. The man opened the doors completely and allowed the two shinobi to enter the large room. The council room was circular in shape with a large, wooden table placed in the center. The table was circular as well with 5 chairs stationed around it. When the duo walked in, 4 out of the 5 chairs were occupied by men all wearing robes that were similar to the ones their greeter was wearing. All of the men were of considerable age, with one of them being elderly. The 5 counselors were startled at seeing the unwelcomed guests entering their meeting room. They all stood up almost at the same time and had similar expressions of surprise on their brows. The elder was the first to speak. Well, what is the meaning of this? We are in an important meeting. Goro, why did you let these 2 in? Apologies, Elder-san, said the counselor that had greeted the 2 shinobi. But these 2 are from the Shinobi Union and wish to speak to us about our discussion. They may be able to help us with our predicament. The counselor, Goro, lowered his voice slightly. Plus, this is Naruto Uzumaki, Elder-san. A man worthy of respect. The elder seemed to pick up on his coworker's hint and widened his eyes at the sudden revelation. He quickly corrected himself. Ah, yes. Uzumaki-san. We are very grateful to be meeting with you. He turned to his fellow counselor. Goro, would you get some chairs for our guests? Goro promptly retrieved 2 chairs from a supply closet and put them next to himself at the round table. When Naruto and Kuratsuchi were made comfortable in their seats, the elder cleared his throat. Now then, Uzumaki-san. What business does the Shinobi Union have with Kusugakure? Naruto raised his eyebrows in mild surprise. Oh, I believe you should ask my friend here. He gestured to Kuratsuchi, who appeared to be extremely perturbed. She's the representative for IWA in the Union. I'm merely an escort of sorts. Kuratsuchi swallowed her pride and frustration at the apparent disrespect to handle the task at hand. We've come to invite you to the Shinobi Union. The elder smiled at that declaration. Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, there is our solution. Kuratsuchi was rather baffled by the man's reaction. What are you talking about? Allow me to explain, the elder chimed with earnest. Kusa's economy has been dwindling of late. Because of this peaceful era we are in, we have had a major decrease in missions. Fewer people are hiring shinobi in this region, and we desperately need to change that. Joining the Union would settle that, as we know that you offer missions from all over the world to whomever wants them. This would greatly aid us in our endeavor to save our village's economy. The elder looked at the other counselors seated around the table. I believe that our vote on the matter is all unanimous, correct? I'm afraid not, Elder-san. The elder narrowed his eyes at the source of the voice, his white beard shaking in slight distress. Kaneki, why would you say such a thing? The counselor that had spoken up, Kaneki, had gray steel eyes that seemed to be as stubborn as the metal they resembled. Naruto did not like them one bit. They reminded him of a bandaged counselor that had given much grief to him and his friends before the war. Kaneki was unyielding. I do not think Kusa should be under control by any other nations, Kuratsuchi retorted to the man's ignorant statement. I'm afraid that you don't understand. No nation is above any other in the Union. Everyone is equal and has a voice in our organization. We believe that your nation will be a valuable asset to the Union. Your resources and diplomacy will be very helpful. Kaneki was unfazed by Kuratsuchi's logic. Naruto knew that he would be. Men like that rarely gave in to reason. They would rather deny or neglect it because they had created their own reasoning long ago. The problem was their logic was usually deemed as self-referentially absurd. Of course, they typically denied that fact too, maybe for a time. But your greater nations will stand over us and put control on our little country in no time. We've only ever been your battleground or market for resources. You've never shown any interest in our ideals in the past, so why would you now? Kaneki was reminding Naruto more and more of the former leader of Root, back when it existed, and it was starting to get on his nerves. Despite this, Naruto kept his mouth shut. The elder took back control. Kaneki, you're being ludicrous. Things are different now. None of the great nations have any cause to do what you're stating. Kaneki was like a piece of wood that had fallen in the muddy waters and refused to budge. Perhaps now. But what about later when things are different again? They would have no problem taking us over and controlling our government. The elder was starting to get heated. They could do that now if they wanted to. They could force us to join, but they are giving us a choice. Doesn't that constitute for something? Kaneki's eyes were set and determined. No. The statement was simple but strong enough to make the elder lean back in his chair. Well, it doesn't matter. The elder addressed the entire council. We will have a majority vote. The animosity in Kaneki's eyes was substantial. All those in favor of joining the Shinobi Union say aye. 4 out of the 5 councilors shouted out a resounding aye, and Kaneki's anger was left to brew in his steely eyes. Kaneki stood up from his chair. Elder-san. His tone was venomous. According to our laws, a majority vote can only be held after a formal discussion on the matter has been observed. We've discussed the matter quite enough. The elder could be just as stubborn, and Kaneki knew it, but it has not been formal. If I am to dissuade the councilors here on your foolish proposal, it must be done in a fair and just discussion. We merely had a spat, not a discussion. The elder matched Kaneki's eyes. For what seemed like an eternity, the 2 men glared daggers at each other. They tried to see who would succumb to the other's will first. Very well, the elder finally said. We will adjourn this meeting for now. We will start the formal discussion first thing in the morning. The elder glanced at the two guests who were staring at Kaneki with calculating eyes. And they will join us as well. They have a voice here too. Kaneki decided to humor him. As you wish, Elder-san. I will see you all in the morning. With that, Kaneki shuffled out of the room without another word. After Kaneki had left in such an abrupt fashion, the elder appealed to the two shinobi across from him. I'm sorry about that. Don't worry, we will have this ordeal settled by tomorrow. In the meantime, we will make arrangements to have you both stay in a local inn. Naruto and Kuratsuchi welcomed the prospect of sleeping in comfy beds again. They thanked the counselors and exited out the ornate doors and down the hall. When they reached the bottom of the stairs and the receptionist had beckoned Naruto over, Kuratsuchi gave him a glare that somehow made the Jinchuriki think twice about seeing his admirer. The receptionist pouted when Naruto waved goodbye to her, and the duo left the main building. As the midday sun shone down on the two shinobi, Naruto gave Kuratsuchi a serious expression. I didn't like the resolve in that Kaneki's eyes. Kuratsuchi nodded in agreement and reflected on what she felt about the somber look Naruto was showing. Yes, but I don't think he'll pose much of a problem. It's a 4-1 vote right now. Naruto shook his head. That's not the point. I know that look, Kuratsuchi. Naruto's eyes were still, like a pool formed from an underground spring that had traveled far to reach its destination. That man will do anything to get his way. As Kuratsuchi contemplated the implications of Naruto's observation, she realized that she was not that different. Chapter 9, Defying Reason. The sun had not yet risen and the gentle room was held by the floating, changing light that was not actually there. It was similar to the moment where a candle was almost lit, like the moment of spark that brought some form of dim visibility to the world. Between this transition of night to morning, Kuratsuchi was awake lying in her futon. The inn she and Naruto had decided to stay in was quaint and simple in its structure and service. Her temporary lodging was small and comfortable. Naruto was staying in the room next to hers and she had had difficulty falling asleep the night before with the thought of knowing his presence was near. Kuratsuchi was deep in thought in the early morning hours and her mind was floating like the light around her. She was still uncertain. Her mind lingered on the curious events that seemed to be attracted to her lately. With all these peculiar circumstances surrounding her, it seemed Naruto was at the center of them. This was odd to her because some of those situations had nothing to do with the war hero at all, but somehow they did. They did because he had affected her in more ways than one. She was unsure as to how he had done that. She closed her eyes in frustration when she realized she was hesitating again. Hesitation. She was starting to loathe that word and all it stood for. Why did she hesitate? The question seemed like it was never going to leave the confines of her thinking. The question was like a muddy shadow that tainted the purity of her thoughts. When Naruto was around her, however, the shadow would retreat into the back of her mind. The shadow never really left, but it was easily forgotten when Naruto's brilliance was around. Kuratsuchi brooded on this revelation and wondered if the blonde could make the shadow go away forever. Perhaps that could happen if she would just let him. Of course, she had no idea what that looked like. Maybe the shadow knew. Kuratsuchi was pulled from her thoughts when she heard a gentle knock on her door. She sat up in her nightwear and called out her permission for the visitor to come in. The door opened and a prepared Naruto stood smiling at her. Good morning. Morning, she said as the shadow withdrew. Meet me outside when you're ready? His face was eager and fresh, much like the morning itself. Kuratsuchi agreed and he closed the door. For a brief moment of pause, she relished the way her room brightened before her eyes. The fresh sunlight came streaming in and flooded the room in warmth. The way the light shone around her made her not want to brood any further. She supposed it was better that way. The light was not her enemy, after all. After Kuratsuchi was fully dressed and prepared for the day ahead, she found Naruto waiting outside the inn. The inn was situated in the south quadrant of Kusa and was only a few blocks from Center Square. The quadrant was fairly urban and a string of Kusa citizens were roaming throughout the streets when Kuratsuchi exited the inn. The early morning sky was complemented by the long streaks of thin clouds nestled in its vastness. The summer air in Kusa was rather heavy with moisture considering the rain they received. The amount of rivers the nation had was a testament to that. Naruto acknowledged Kuratsuchi with a broad smile when she approached him. Ready? She smirked and nodded. Come on, hero. Naruto kept the smile as he watched the kunoichi move past him. He followed after her figure with the cloth of her dark cloak billowing in the swaying breeze. He mulled over the way her eyes had shifted when she had turned. Whatever had been bothering her was still present in her mind and Naruto desperately wanted to help her with it. However, the fact she was still trying to conceal it from him implied she was not ready to talk about it. Naruto still needed to learn patience, and this was a good test of that. He would wait. Naruto did not sleep well the night before. His dreams had been filled with gray skies that promised an unnecessary storm for the soft earth beneath it. Naruto did not really like the idea of predictions, but it was not hard to see the sign his mind was trying to convey to him. The counselor, Kaneki, was more than just a man that stood against reason and the beneficial future. He was also a symbol for the people's fear. He represented all the people and their denial of what they knew was best for them. Naruto had dealt with feelings like this before, but he definitely did not enjoy doing so. He would need to handle this issue with delicate care because it was all based around a worldview. Destroying someone's worldview typically ended up leaving quite a mess in its wake, and Naruto wanted to make sure it would bring lasting effects. Still, he had seen it all backfire before. Naruto was shaken from his thoughts when Kuratsuchi stopped in front of him. Naruto looked past her shoulder and realized they were standing in front of the entrance to the headquarters. Naruto observed the way Kuratsuchi stared at the door in front of her and was motionless for a moment. Naruto was about to say something when she opened the door and walked into the main lobby. The receptionist from yesterday looked up from her work and stood up from her chair when she saw Naruto. The massive grin and wave the attractive receptionist gave the blonde was enough to make most men feel lucky enough to have just been noticed. Yoo-hoo! Uzumaki-san. Naruto was not surprised she had figured out his identity since yesterday. Before he had the chance to make the mistake of waving back, he noticed the side glance Kuratsuchi was giving him. The glance held irritation but also a hint of rosy regret. Naruto was unsure as to what the regret stemmed from, but he quickly assessed the situation at hand anyways. He nodded to the receptionist out of mere politeness and followed after Kuratsuchi without saying a single word. The receptionist stared up at the duo with disappointed shock. Naruto tried not to smile too widely when he saw the hint of redness on Kuratsuchi's face as they got to the top of the stairs. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Thank you?" Naruto chuckled and moved past her. "Don't thank me yet. There are more solutions we need to find today," he said with a soft inflection. Kuratsuchi gave him a small smile and they strolled down the hallway towards the ornate doors that stood between them and their current problem. Naruto could hear the shouting before they had even reached the extravagant doors. As Kuratsuchi pushed open the doors and 5 pairs of eyes looked at them, Naruto wondered if his previous notion had been a good one. Naruto quickly observed the fact that a secretary was seated next to the elder on the far side of the table, taking notes. She had not looked up when the duo had entered the room. The 5 counselors appeared to have been in the council room for a while now. Naruto would not have believed they even went home at all. Naruto could feel the heated gaze of steel gray on him when he walked in, but he remained undaunted. When Kaneki and the war hero locked eyes, the grizzly counselor stood from his seat. "Uzumaki-san. It would be best if you and your companion took a seat unless you would like to interrupt our affairs again." Naruto's face had been stoic when he entered and he kept the same expression as he sat down at the round table with Kuratsuchi seated next to him. He said nothing. To Naruto's bewilderment, the kunoichi was placid and silent at the moment. The elder cleared his throat while giving a stern look to Kaneki. "That was very rude, Kaneki. These shinobi are our guests, and it would benefit you to watch your manners." The elder's expression softened when he shifted his attention to the 2 guests. "I apologize, my friends. There was no actual interruption as our discussion has not been made formal yet." The elder addressed the general assembly at the table. "Now that everyone is present, we will disregard all comments and arguments given prior to now and begin the formal discussion." The elder nodded to his secretary, who acknowledged his request and began to write the official record of the meeting. The elder opened the discussion by directly addressing the steely-eyed counselor. "Kaneki, seeing as how you've started all of this with your demands, it is only right that you defend your argument first." Kaneki stood straight and was like a tall spire of earth jutting strongly from the shoreline of some old, forgotten beach. It was at this moment where Naruto perceived the uncomfortable movement of the 2 unnamed counselors at the table. They did not look at Kaneki when he stood and had involuntary spasms of unnecessary gestures that indicated their uneasiness. Naruto did not like it. "Thank you, Elder-san," Kaneki said crisply. "I would like to start by stating that the decision this committee agrees upon will ultimately decide the fate of this village. With that in mind, I permit you all to heed my advice on the matter." Kaneki allowed his words to sink in for a moment. No one said anything. Naruto remained motionless, and his bright eyes focused on the counselor coolly. Kaneki's jaw was set, his gray stubble stood as rigid on his chin as he did. "Now then, Kusugakure must not join the Shinobi Union, to put it bluntly. To do so would end decades of tradition and make us vulnerable to foreign powers. The elder stood from his seat with clenched fists and a snarling mouth. I already told you, Kaneki. That is a fallacious statement. You are appealing to tradition, and you can't expect you dash. Kaneki's eyes widened in their stormy expanses. Elder-san. It is the policy of this discussion that all interruptions will be exempt from the record. I believe you were the one to propose such a policy a few years ago. Am I wrong? The elder's ire was palpable. His old teeth gritted under the immense white hairs of his beard as he left the question unanswered. He looked back at his secretary that had stopped her writing. She was staring up at the elder whose rage began to subside reluctantly. He sat back down in reticence. Kaneki continued as Naruto's gaze never left his frame. We must remain independent. Don't you see, my fellow counselors? To join the union would mean for us to give up a part of ourselves. A part of us that has been hard won over years of toil and strife. We are lacking in funds and our economy is dwindling, that is true. However, we have had similar problems in the past, and we have always made it through in the end. I suggest that we invest more in our trade through the rivers and that will fix itself in no time. Kaneki paused and glared directly at Naruto. Rain clouds met the clear sky for a brief period of time. Naruto was an imposing sight to behold, and he was impressed by the resolve behind Kaneki's eyes. Kaneki pointed an accusing finger at the blonde. This man would say that our solution is to join the other nations and become part of them. Ha! We might as well be their slaves. They would have our very freedom. The very thing that makes us what we are. Have we no pride? Have we no dignity? Kaneki's voice thundered throughout the small room. I say we stand up to the great nations and say we are strong because of who we are. We are the grass that others trample upon, but we have always stood tall and never withered. We have always been the ones to cover the other nations' mistakes and battles. But the grass never forgets. Never have we faltered in our principles, and we won't now. We are the grass. We are Kusa. There was a thick silence that enveloped the room. The only sound that was heard was the scrawling sound of the secretary's pen. All eyes were on Kaneki and his steeled resolve. No one was certain if he had finished or not. After the general pause that normally indicated a person was finished speaking, there was still silence. Naruto's expression did not change even when Kuratsuchi finally rose from her chair and broke the icy stillness. She was a figure of composure. Wonderful speech. Honestly. Very moving. Her eyes may have been calm, but Naruto detected a red flame in them, nonetheless. Are you done blowing hot air now? Kaneki's eyes narrowed and he looked at Kuratsuchi like a king would a peasant. Kuratsuchi did not wait for an answer that would probably never come. First off, Naruto isn't the person who wants you to join us. I am. I'm tired of you all ignoring me. Kuratsuchi was curt but still portrayed no fury. Secondly, the Union acknowledges you as a sovereign nation and would never take away your freedom nor your identity. I can't imagine why any of you would think otherwise. We're not some warmongers running around gathering up those we find lesser and using them to our advantage. We want to help all of you, and the very fact that you believe we don't is an insult to us. Kaneki broke the metal that lined his jaw and smirked. Does it look like I care if I insult you? Kuratsuchi was stronger than that. Her posture was strong and unyielding like her eyes were. No, it doesn't, she stated simply. The smirk was unyielding as well. You live in a world of imagination and pretty things, young lady. Reality is a lot colder than you think it is. It's filled with pain and malice. Your foolish philosophy won't change that. Men's hearts will always remain dark and unforgiving. This world is hell, and the only way we can fight against it is to use what we know will work. What has worked in the past will work again, and that is the only truth we will ever have. Stop dreaming and wake up. Smell the grass and the dying world that it covers. Kaneki kept the smirk even when he was done speaking. If there was anything powerful enough to break the kunoichi's composure, it was that. Of course, Kuratsuchi only thought it was powerful. When a person neglected reason, it was always clear to see. However, Kuratsuchi's mind cowered at the counselor's declaration. He was right, she thought. Why did she care otherwise? Reality was dark, was not that what she had decided? How could she defend against the solid reason he claimed? She did not consider the faulty ideas behind his truth at that moment because she was so enraptured by her own grief. It was all pointless, and she could not fight back against the depravity in the world. She could not do anything. After Kaneki had finished and Kuratsuchi was left to brood, one of the unnamed counselors stood up. If I may, I think we should take a first vote now. We can make our final decision after everyone has stated their piece, but for now, I think we should state our positions on the matter. The elder was still recovering from the powerful words that had been spoken that morning, but he was still able to speak. I agree. The elder grinned, for he knew where his fellow counselors stood in their beliefs. All those in favor of not joining the Shinobi Union, please raise your hands. The elder's grin grew wide when he saw Kaneki raise his hand, but then it vanished when he saw more rise up. The two unnamed counselors' hands were high in the air. The elder's eyes widened and he stammered in disbelief. What? Naruto glared at the two counselors. He knew there was something lingering within their damp brows and their shifting eyes. Something more than just mere coercion. Naruto's eyes turned back to Kaneki when he heard him softly chuckle. Kaneki's mirth was deemed as repulsive to Naruto's stomach. Well then. There you have it, Elder-san. It would seem that my reason has won over the majority. 3-2, if my math is correct. The elder laid his hands on the table in outrage. I don't understand. Why? How has this man appealed to you? The counselor that had spoken earlier raised his voice to match his hand. His voice quivered slightly and did not go by unnoticed by Naruto's calculative perceptions. He speaks the truth, Elder-san. What has worked before will work in the future. The counselor could not believe what he was hearing. Do you really believe in that fallacy? Have you denied what is clear to reason so much that you no longer see it? We need the union. I thought you were against Kaneki only yesterday. The unnamed counselor shifted in his chair. A man has the right to change his mind, Elder-san. We are sorry that you don't agree with Kaneki-san's views, but it would be best not to shout as it is rather unseemly. The elder was made speechless and fell back into his chair and his trust. It was at this time Goro finally said something. Please, my friends. I beseech you, do not fall for the absurdity in Kaneki's claims. Do you really believe what you are saying is true? Does the man speak reason? Yes, the unnamed counselor said. Naruto saw it. The averted gaze, the twitch of the mouth, the falsehood in the subtle gestures of the hands. The counselor was lying. The other one was the same. Naruto did not know as to why the two counselors were lying, but he knew that it had something to do with Kaneki and his stubbornness. Naruto had been afraid of this. Despite this revelation, he remained silent. Kuratsuchi did not look up as there was a commotion brewing in the council room. She stared at the dark wood of the round table. She stared into the dark abyss. She was held down by her doubts, and the shadow was allowed to creep again. It wound through the darkness and coiled itself around her thoughts, staining her mind with ink. The ink drowned her and made her unable to hear what was being said around her. She was deaf to the world, and she felt her chest cave in under the weight upon her. Kaneki was right, and the other counselors agreed with him. Of course, they did, because he was right. She was drowning. How could she stop it? The shadow would not let her go, and she could not stop it. Suddenly, she was brought to the surface by the elder's slamming hands. Quiet! Quiet! Kuratsuchi's eyes roamed around the table as everyone quieted down. Apparently, there had been shouting and ferocity exchanged. The elder was calming everyone down, although he appeared to be the most agitated amid the assembly. Let's take a recess. There is much to still think about. We will continue this meeting at 3 o'clock. For once, everyone agreed and left the room with a mix of mumbles and distrust. A great schism had been formed amid the counselors, and Naruto despised it. Kuratsuchi and Naruto left the building together, and did not even notice the receptionist attempting to get the blonde's attention again. The midday sun rose high directly above the duo as they searched for a place to have lunch. I'm famished, Naruto announced as Kuratsuchi looked down at her feet. She must have not heard him, he thought, because she did not reply or even acknowledge him. Naruto scrunched his face and smacked his hand onto her back. Kuratsuchi winced in pain at the power behind the hit and immediately decked Naruto in the stomach. Naruto recoiled forward when the wind was knocked out of him. Naruto, being as strong as he was, should not have felt that blow, but there was something odd about a woman's punch that always seemed to break through a man's defense. That fucking hurt, hero. The hell was that for? Kuratsuchi yelled, the shadow already forgotten. Naruto got his breath back and looked at Kuratsuchi with one eye open. I had to get your attention somehow. Shit, your punches hurt more than Sakura's, and that's saying something. She punched a goddess once, you know. Kuratsuchi ignored him and looked beyond him. Let's eat at that noodle stand. I could really use some ramen. I'm famished. Naruto gawked at the audacity of the woman that sauntered her way over to the stand. How dare she just ignore him like that? Then again, there was ramen. The two shinobi sat at the bar and gave their orders to the cook. The cook wrote down their orders and headed to the back. Kuratsuchi looked towards Naruto, who appeared to have gotten over his surprise and was now focusing on something else. She put up her front. Can you believe that meeting, Hiro? Those two idiots are agreeing with Kaneki and now we have to persuade them. My job couldn't get any harder. Why was she saying this? She agreed with Kaneki too, but she could not openly admit it. Maybe she was lying to Naruto. Or she was lying to herself. Either way, she did not know what the truth was anymore. No, Naruto said. Kuratsuchi's eyebrows raised. Naruto directed his gaze to her. Kaneki has something on those two, Kuratsuchi. I don't know what, but they didn't believe a word they said. How can you tell? When a man openly defies reason and knows that he has to wholeheartedly believe in his absurdity. Only then can he look a man in the eye and tell him that he believes what he says without any doubts. Those two doubted. I don't know what Kaneki is using to get them to lie against their beliefs, but it can't be good. As a bowl of noodles was placed in front of her, Kuratsuchi pondered on Naruto's words. Kuratsuchi doubted her beliefs too, even though she thought she knew them. The truth was becoming something that was harder and harder to grasp. Naruto seemed to know what it was, but she doubted that too, because who knew what was anything anymore? Kuratsuchi certainly did not know. It seemed that the shadow did not know either. Chapter 10. Everything that rises must converge. The delicate sky was broader than Kaneki had remembered. He realized it had been some time since he had last appreciated or thought about the sky. He supposed that was because he had forgotten himself a long time ago. It was always hard to find something that was forgotten, especially if it was intentionally done so. Kaneki cleared his head and concluded he should visit his little family. He rose from his seat where he had been eating his lunch and walked down the path towards the east quadrant. The streets were filled with peaceful and loyal citizens roaming about. Kaneki smiled and waved to those who were gracious enough to give him some of their time. Kaneki's robes rippled when a small group of children ran to him with cheerful expressions. He held tiny, outstretched hands with earnest and returned the brilliant smiles he was given. Kaneki laughed and told the children he would play with them later. The children reluctantly left his company and ran past him to find their own sunny adventures. Kaneki could not help but muse about the summers he had experienced as a child. He used to run these same streets and cause trouble for the residents with his pranks and antics. But that was long ago, back when he knew himself. Back when summers used to be sunny. Back when guests from other countries were more respectful of their elders and hosts. Back when people knew how to run a government and listen to reason. The two Union fools could not understand that, Kaneki thought. They could not appreciate those sunny days because they blinded themselves with opinions and change. They just did not understand. Kaneki traversed through the familiar streets until he reached his home. Before going in, he stopped in front of his door. A curious thought passed his mind, like a smooth leaf through the windy grass. The thought was not filled with something like ignorance or forgetfulness, but with hope and brilliance. Kaneki had no idea as to why the thought came or where it had come from, but somehow it gave him peace. The most curious part about it was that he did not even know what the thought was. Even as he opened the door to his home and saw his daughter in the kitchen with his grandson in her arms, Kaneki still could not decipher the thought. Kaneki's daughter gave him a puzzled expression when he walked in. "Hello, father. I thought you were at a council meeting?" Kaneki smiled pleasantly and his steely eyes melted at the heartwarming sight before him. "We took a small recess, my dear." He glanced around the large foyer and into the broad kitchen in front of him. "Where's your husband?" His daughter smiled sweetly. "He went to get some groceries for the baby." Suddenly, a troubled look passed over her features. "Are you sure it's fine that we stay here, father?" Kaneki chuckled deeply. "Of course, dear. We've been over this already. I have plenty of room for all three of you." She looked down at her feet in slight embarrassment at having asked the question. "I know, but I feel like we're freeloading." "Nonsense. You're my only child, so I have plenty to spoil you with. Now let's talk about something with more substance, yes?" Kaneki's daughter brightened and walked up to her father, holding her sleeping son. "Yes, father." "How is the meeting going then?" Kaneki's demeanor must have darkened, he thought, because his daughter appeared to be instantly concerned by his reaction. The subject certainly had more substance, but it was not the substance he had been thinking of. Still, his daughter would understand him. The council is being foolish by letting foreigners interfere with our diplomatic issues. His daughter's concern did not dissipate. He was not surprised. She had always been exceptional at discerning problems and lies hidden beneath truth. "Foreigners, father? From where?" "Just some representatives from the Shinobi Union that have no respect for tradition. They want to change everything that this village has stood for. They think they know better." Sheer animosity was layered all across Kaniki's features from the thought of the two guests. Kaniki's daughter was calm and seemed to be pensive about her father's words. What exactly do they want to do? They want us to join the Union, my dear. They want to trample on us again after all that they've done. What makes you say that? Kaniki's daughter seemed to be in dismay about what he had done. Have they given you any reason to suggest such a thing? It sounds like they want to help us, father. Kaniki was not liking where this was going. It almost sounded like his daughter was defending the fools. It doesn't matter, sweetheart. They've used us before, so they will do it again. His daughter suddenly looked tired, as if she had only been pretending she had ever had energy. Father, you're being unreasonable. I think they could really help the village. Kaniki was definitely upset with that statement. My dear, you don't understand. You don't know what I know. You haven't seen what I've seen. Kaniki was disillusioned when he saw his daughter's anger surface. It was as if a seal he did not know existed was finally seen but then broken at the same time. Like what? Like when mother was killed when I was little? Like you're the only one who's felt pain about all of that, father? Or like the way the Iwane murdered her and half the village because everyone had decided that we were all of a sudden bigger than we actually were? Because only you understand all of that, huh? There was a fire in her eyes that was just as rare as it was passionate. The baby stirred and whined in her arms. Kaniki was shocked at the sudden outburst from his daughter. She was furious, and he had never known her to be disrespectful. These foreigners were ruining everything, he thought. We were at war. We had to show that we weren't going to be pushed around anymore. Just like they're trying to do now. The only difference is that this time they're slapping the word peace on everything. No, father! You always assume that the past completely mirrors the present. Things can change, father. The baby was awake now and joined in on the obvious frustration in the room. He squirmed and cried in irritation. The noise aggravated Kaniki, and he scowled at his daughter. Stop this. I don't want to hear this disrespect from you. I'm going to be late. When I return, I demand that you promise to never speak to me like that again. He turned to leave the house and leave the argument to stir in negligence. He usually did that when he knew he was fighting a losing battle. He did not want to think because thinking was painful and brought up the truth. Kaniki did not have the courage to handle truth, and he could not remember the last time he did. His daughter had it though, and that frightened him. Before Kaniki turned around and left the house, he saw the glistening of hot tears fall down his daughter's face to mingle with her son's. Yes, he thought, courage frightened him greatly. Naruto entered the circular room for the second time that day and was thankful when he saw that Kaniki had not arrived yet. He noticed the two counselors that had supported Kaniki were there, and knew this was his chance. Only the two counselors were in the room when Naruto and Kuratsuchi entered it. Naruto took off his traveling cloak and laid it on the chair next to where Kuratsuchi was seated. When he moved over to the two older men, she sent an inquisitive glance at him. Excuse me, gentlemen, Naruto began. The two counselors showed immediate discomfort, and seemed like they would rather be anywhere else at that moment. Naruto knew he had to be blunt. He did not have much time. There has been something odd about this meeting, wouldn't you say? One of the counselors had a long, droopy mustache that was reminiscent of a piece of rope. The other had a clean-shaven and withered face. We are both unsure as to what you mean, Uzumaki-san, said the counselor with the rope-like mustache. Naruto forced as much charm and patience he could muster into his pleasant smile. Allow me to enlighten both of you then. The sharp fear that passed over the counselor's features gave Naruto confidence to continue. I have a notion that neither of you truly believe what you have been saying in this council room today. The counselor with the mustache attempted to feign outrage, but Naruto knew a bad actor when he saw one. He hated it when people lied to themselves. That is a preposterous allegation, Uzumaki-san, and we would greatly appreciate that you take it back. Naruto was not amused and hardened his smile considerably. So you deny it? The counselor nodded his head in an almost frantic manner. Then you can say, with the utmost certainty, that you do not wish to join the Shinobi Union, despite the fact that you voted to join it only yesterday with the same amount of vigor as you vote for the opposing side today? When Naruto saw the obvious doubt slither across the counselor's eyes, he knew he had won. The counselor knew too. His face seemed to drop like his facial hair. You do not understand, Uzumaki-san. Naruto sighed and looked at the other counselor who seemed to be fixated on the wall behind him. You are correct, counselor. I do not wish to either, I'm afraid. It does not really matter how he has won you two over threats, bribery, or even just common probing. The point is that both of you actually want to join the union and know that you should, correct? The two counselors looked at each other, and then up at Naruto. There was remorse in those two pairs of eyes, and Naruto empathized with them. His shoulders slumped down, and he spoke to that remorse. It would be best if both of you tell the truth in this meeting, gentlemen. If you both truly believe that Kusa should not join the Shinobi Union, then please vote for that. Naruto squared his shoulders and glared at the two counselors. However, if either of you lie again in this meeting, then I will know. And I promise you both that I will make you regret it. Naruto did not like threatening people, but in order to represent justice, a hero had to represent truth too. When he had finally heard the truth, Naruto took his seat next to Kuratsuchi. Kuratsuchi had heard the entire conversation and smirked at Naruto when he sat down. Naruto folded his arms and met Kuratsuchi's gaze. "Thank you," she said simply. Kuratsuchi wanted to better express her gratitude on the matter, but she found that to be difficult. She was still chained down by Kaniki's words and her doubts, so she was having trouble trying to discern her feelings. Naruto did not seem to mind when she gave him a meager thanks. He smiled at her. It was a smile that made the shadow go away for a little while and made her want to believe in him. If only she knew what that looked like. The elder, the secretary, and Goro entered the council room a few minutes later, and it did not take long for Kaneki to make his presence known after that. Naruto immediately noticed the fact there was deep frustration in his stormy, gray eyes when he entered. Kaneki took his seat and fixed his eyes on the elder to continue the meeting. The elder received a silent nod from the secretary to indicate she was ready and started the meeting. "Now then, I believe that it would be only fair if we heard from the union's side of things. Does that sit well with you, Kaneki?" Kaneki gave no indication he was perturbed by the elder's sly quip and simply agreed to the matter with a nod. The elder motioned for Kuratsuchi to stand and speak. Naruto stared up at the kunoichi with narrowed eyes as she rose from her seat. At this moment, Kuratsuchi was unpredictable. Naruto's previous embarrassment and timid accounts with the young woman had faded away in a short amount of time. He had been nervous around her before, but he had recently developed a protective and cautious attitude towards her. He did not want her making a dangerous mistake or foolish action. In some ways, she was like a time bomb of emotions and doubts. The worst part about it was Naruto did not have an inkling as to where it all stemmed from or what her thoughts were about it. Needless to say, Naruto was worried. Kuratsuchi cleared her throat and tried to remain calm. She had to speak about what she knew to be true. Kaneki was wrong, she told herself. Life had meaning. It had to. She hoped repeating these thoughts in her mind would make it all true. By telling herself they were facts, she knew she could make herself believe it all. But she did not believe. The shadow would not let her. "Kusa must join the Shinobi Union," Kuratsuchi said with clear articulation. "The Union only wishes to help the village and has no motive to betray or harm them in any way. I promise you all that." Does anyone have anything to retort? Kuratsuchi had expected for Kaneki to stand and begin a loud tirade about how foolish and untrustworthy she was. Instead, Kaneki sat in his chair and was silent for a moment. The two counselors Naruto spoke to earlier stared at their ringleader with quiet awe. Kuratsuchi steeled her resolve and glared at him with a set jaw and unblinking eyes. Naruto sat in his seat with his hands folded over his face. If anyone from Konoha was there at that moment, they would have said Naruto resembled the current Hokage with his aura of halcyon surveillance. Finally, Kaneki replied, "I do not believe you." His voice was crisp and unforgiving. No one was surprised. The elder stood from his chair and was practically fuming. Naruto never knew a man of that age could exude such raw fury. "I am sick of your insolence, Kaneki. You have been nothing but rude and illogical this entire meeting, and it is time that you cease this farce you have been putting on. These two shinobi are reliable soldiers that have proven their merit to the world on more than one occasion, and you just sit there and say that you do not believe them?" Kaneki did not even look at the elder when he turned to the secretary. "Would it be permissible to take a vote at this time?" The secretary looked up at the elder for permission. The elder seemed to deflate at Kaneki's curt disrespect. Naruto surmised it must have been a short-lived ire. The elder agreed to the notion with a silent wave of his fingers as he flopped into his chair in defeat. The secretary took the vote. Her voice was delicate and odd in the heated atmosphere. "All those in favor of joining the Shinobi Union?" Naruto made sure to be as obvious as possible when he stared at the two counselors. 4 hands were raised in the air, and that was the moment the chaos started. Kaneki's eyes were like silvery bullets that were about to impale the two vulnerable counselors. Both of the counselors' hands were shaking weakly in the air and looked like they were about to collapse from fear. Naruto could not help but smirk behind his folded hands. They were not lying to themselves anymore, and that meant Naruto had gotten through to them. The elder's attitude had flipped completely. His grin was wide as he turned his attention to Kaneki. Well, it seems that the majority is in favor of the union. Interesting. Kaneki jumped from his seat as he felt his hot blood course through his body, increasing his rage with every pulse. Why was everyone disagreeing with him? This was not supposed to be happening. He would not accept defeat from these children. Everyone was against him and his ideology. They were all fools, he decided, his daughter, the council, the foreigners, and the village. Everyone was a fool, don't you see? Kaneki's voice roared and bounced throughout the room. The secretary jumped in bewilderment and stopped her note-taking briefly. These two foreigners don't wish to help us. Elder San has proven that he does not wish to either. I am the only one who has this village's best intentions. Only I can save Kusa. I am the grass and I will bury all of you. Kuratsuchi glared at Kaneki with disgust. Is that a threat, old man? No. I have no means to fight a fool who denies reality. Kuratsuchi cringed at that remark but quickly regained her composure. The old counselor's anger was contagious. I'll fucking smash your skull in, you prick! Kaneki raised a finger and grinned maniacally. See? The woman cannot control herself. She cannot be trusted, just like I said. That did it. Naruto was done with this nonsense. He had been silent long enough. Just as Kuratsuchi was about to launch a chakra-enhanced fist into Kaneki's nose, Naruto rose from his seat. All eyes were on the blonde as his towering and broad-framed faced Kaneki. I believe that self-control was thrown out the window some time ago, Kaneki-san. Kaneki could not hide his astonishment at seeing the man that had not said a word in the meeting all day suddenly speak up with such a stoic and resilient disposition. Kuratsuchi gazed at Naruto with the same level of amazement. She had not expected him to say anything. This was not his fight. Naruto continued, when a man starts spouting nonsense, it is only natural for rational individuals to call him out on it. It's always a shame when the man happens to be one in a position of power. Naruto's eyes were the shade of the deep ocean where light was barely seen. He was tired of all this. There has been little reason behind your words today, Kaneki-san. The surprise must have died away in that moment because Kaneki spoke back to the war hero. Although, he lowered his voice this time around. It seems that the girl's imagination has worn off on you too, Uzumaki. Keeping your mouth shut was the most sensible thing you have done all day and now you go and ruin it. Naruto was not bothered by that statement. His face was placid, revealing nothing. Tell me, Kaneki-san, what exactly is your definition of reality? Kaneki's grin was grotesque and ugly as he was given the chance to demonstrate his golden ideology. Reality is hard, merciless, cold, and piled high with the bodies of those who dream of change. Reality is not limited by any fool's imagination or idiotic visions of the future. It is crafted by those wise men that have fabricated society and the world as we know it. Reality is filled with cruel intentions, and only those that accept that can succeed in it. Everyone in the room, except for Naruto, was visibly appalled at the definition. For one thing, Kaneki had only described his version of the characteristics of his reality, but Naruto decided not to call him out on it. Focusing on details would surely get them nowhere. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck and sighed loudly. Perhaps you're right. No one in the room, especially Kaneki, expected that answer. Kuratsuchi felt some hope drain in her soul when he said that. The man had been so strong and confident before. However, she noticed he did not appear to be hopeless when he said it. In fact, Naruto flashed a small smirk at Kaneki. I mean, there's definitely a possibility that your reality exists, but I still don't like it, Naruto confessed. Honestly, if your reality is correct and everything that I believe to be true is actually wrong, then I think that's fine too. Kaneki had lost control of his jaw as it was hanging wide open as Naruto spoke. The reality that I've created seems pretty awesome if that's how it works. I'd rather live in a world that has hope and merriment than your cold one. I certainly didn't risk my life and fight a goddess just to live in a world that doesn't change. I'd like to think that I've changed for the better, and there is nothing subjective about that. Kuratsuchi felt something fill her spirit as Naruto's words flew around in her mind. It felt like something warm and bright. It was something that made the shadow quiver and the hope gather. Naruto was not finished yet. I've seen many of my comrades and friends die, and I should be the first to tell you that the world is unforgiving and cruel. But I can't. I can't because they would all punch me in the face for saying such a thing. They trusted me to find a solution on how to stop all this hate and strife in the world. I've become strong to find that answer, and for you to say that the grass is what covers and fixes things just sounds weird. Your traditional views just don't make sense. Just because something worked before doesn't mean that it will always work in the future. The council room felt different then, and Naruto's words flowed around, sublimating everyone in it. You see, the world is unclear and scary. But that doesn't mean we should come up with simple answers and think that we've got it all figured out. I met a guy who believed that once, and it was because of his views about agony that held him down. He thought the world was so much different than it actually was. I told him that, and I managed to help him through those thoughts. The world is messed up, but that doesn't mean we haven't made an impact. I think this world is beautiful and worth struggling for. I know this because I haven't forgotten what my precious people have said and done for me. I haven't forgotten the person that they believe in. I haven't forgotten myself. Suddenly, Kaneki remembered that thought he had while he was standing in front of his house earlier that day. It had been a thought where he had remembered himself, and what he had believed. Kaneki used to believe he could change the world for the better. He had once believed the world was beautiful in its complexities and had wanted to try to find the answers to the hard questions in life. That had all changed when his wife had been killed in the Third Shinobi World War. He tried to forget about his wife after the war and his thoughts of making the world better through change. He had forgotten himself because it hurt to remember. He had denied reason because it did not hurt so much. He held on to his reality because he felt safe there, and he did not have to change anything. But for some reason, this time it did not hurt to remember. It felt nice to remember his dreams. Maybe remembering was a crucial part to living. Kuratsuchi was having a similar revelation in that moment. Naruto was right. There was beauty in the world because it was teeming with meaning. Her ideas of meaninglessness did not make much sense when Naruto was around speaking about principles as if they were facts. Because of Naruto, Kuratsuchi was able to understand the fault in her logic. There were people that were worth the struggles and hardship because there was meaning behind it. If there was no meaning, then nothing would exist at all because reality was full of reasons to live and fight. This was why she stood with Naruto, why she was with the Union, and why she was a shinobi, to find the things worth fighting for and fight with everything she had. When Kuratsuchi gazed up at Naruto's confident posture and heard his wise words, she knew what to fight for. After Naruto had finished his speech, the council had voted for the last time on the subject of joining the Shinobi Union. The vote was unanimous. Kusa would join the Union. When Kaneki had raised his hand to vote for the Union, he had been in a daze. He knew what he had been voting for, but he was not sure as to why his ideals had changed so quickly. He had to adjust to how the world really worked, and it felt like his head was spinning at trying to figure it all out. He supposed voting for the obvious decision was probably the best. The war hero had shown he could be trusted, and maybe it was time for Kaneki to remember trust sometimes just made sense. There was a lush, green hill that rose lazily in the earth on the northeast side of Kusugakure. When the sun would set in the west, it would cast its brilliant light on the hill, making it shine like a grand emerald. The hill was dotted with a variety of trees that followed along a narrow trade route. It was on this road where the setting sun washed the two travelers hiking up the hill. A little blue bird flew past Naruto's head and sang its sweet tune as the blonde smiled up at the creature in admiration. He stopped hiking for a moment, and whistled a similar melody to the little bird. Ahead of him, Kuratsuchi turned to him with an amused smile. "You know something, hero?" she asked as Naruto averted his gaze from the bird to hear what the gorgeous woman had to say. "Every time I think I have you pegged as a certain kind of person or think that I know you, you go and surprise me." Naruto stopped whistling and chuckled. "I have been known to be unpredictable, I guess." Kuratsuchi lowered her eyelids and wondered if she liked that answer. "I can't believe that you won over that council. I really thought that we had failed." Naruto shrugged nonchalantly. "Even if we did, it wouldn't have mattered. The more important thing was that everyone was honest with themselves and everyone at least heard the truth. I can't make someone believe, Kuratsuchi, but I can show them how to." Kuratsuchi smiled because she definitely liked that answer. "Yes, you can. You did a fantastic job of that, hero." She looked down at the ground and shuffled her feet in discomfort. She did not want this moment to come. Her mission at Kusa was finished, and she did not know where to go now. She was afraid of what was going to happen. "So, what do we do now?" Naruto chewed on his lip in thought for a moment. "Well, I was thinking of heading towards Taki maybe." "What do you think?" Kuratsuchi was visibly stunned at Naruto's question. "Huh? You want me to go with you?" Naruto was perplexed by her reaction and could not help but laugh at her realization. "Of course. If you'll have me, then I'd like to accompany you on your journey. It seems only fitting considering our missions are roughly the same. I think we can really help each other out." Naruto sounded like he was oozing with confidence, but he was certain his heartbeat was giving away his anxiety. So much for being protective and cautious, he thought. He had expected her to leave him and go about her duties without him. He wanted to be with her so badly. It felt like he was just getting to know her, and he wanted to continue his discoveries of who exactly Kuratsuchi was. Kuratsuchi felt the heat elevate in her face as she realized her awkward situation. Oh well, of course. We should do that. Help each other out. Sounds great. She could not handle the joy welling up in her. She wanted to scream and dance around, but she knew that would not help her embarrassment at all. Instead, Kuratsuchi turned around and hid her excitement by climbing up the hill's trail. Naruto smiled and followed after his new companion. He wondered what kind of adventures he would have with the pink-eyed kunoichi, and if his feelings would come across to her successfully. He was nervous and scared of the future, but that certainly did not quell his enthusiasm for it. Naruto had dedicated himself to marching towards the unknown with those he called precious. As Naruto watched a familiar bluebird soar above Kuratsuchi's ebony locks, he knew exactly who was precious to him.